Assistant Director Bian Ganapin. From the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Deputy Governor Diwa Ginigundo. From the Department of Budget and Management, Director Rolando Toledo. From the Department of Social Welfare and Development, Mr. Noel Macalalad, Assistant Secretary. From the Department of Trade and Industry, Yusek Ruth Castelo. From the Department of Agriculture, Yusek Sigfredo Serrano. From the Department of Transportation, Yusek Gary de Guzman. From the Philippine Statistics Authority, Ms. Rosalinda Bautista. From the Sugar Regulatory Authority, Mr. Luis Marajas. From the National Food Authority, Attorney Judy Carol Dansal. From the University of the Philippines School of Statistics, Dr. Claire Dennis Mapa. From the Action for Economic Reforms, Ms. Carla Yu and Mr. Adolfo Jose Montesa. And from the Philippine Institute of Petroleum, Mr. Teddy Reyes, Executive Director. From LTFRB, Attorney Zona Tamayo. Everyone has been acknowledged.
Thank you, Comsec, and let me acknowledge the presence of Senator Bamakino. Once again, thank you very much for joining us in this third hearing on inflation. Ever since the beginning of 2018, every time we turn on the television or the radio, madalas po natin naririnig ngayon yung balita tungkol sa pagtaas ng presyo. In fact, just the other day when I was watching TV, a channel featured this lady, isang senior citizen na nag-aantay po ng mahigit 2 oras para makabili lang po ng NFA rice o ng murang bigas. Because ang justification niya, yung mga commercial rice ay hindi na kaya ng kanilang budget, especially na senior citizen na siya. This July, inflation went up again by 5.7%, an increase from the June inflation of 5.2%. And that is the highest in the last 5 years, ever since the rebasing in 2013, in the year of 2013. And that's the 7th time that inflation increased just this 2018. As we all know, the 5.7% inflation has already breached the DBCC forecast of 2 to 4% for 2018. And makikita ho natin to empirically and also anecdotally in the wet markets, in the grocery stores. We selected some items from the list of PSA monitored commodities. Ang well-milled rice increased by 12% from a year ago, or 5 pesos per kilo to date. Ang bangus po, tumaas ng 14.3% or 20 kilos from a year ago. And ang sitaw, na madalas po kinakain ng mga kababayan natin, tumaas po ng almost 50%, no, 50, or 40 pesos per kilo from a year ago. So just going around the supermarket, going around the wet market, makikita natin na marami sa mga basic commodities that our families buy and feed their families. So today we will like to hear some updates from the economic team, and at the end of the updates we also want to hear solutions. No? I think what we will need are immediate short-term solutions that we can employ in the next 90 days. Hopefully those solutions will also have drastic impact to the pricing of basic commodities. Over the past few months, we've been hearing different proposed solutions. One from the House of Representatives. I think the economic team of the House of Representatives also put forth some of their mitigating measures. Although these are information coming from the media, we would like to also hear from the executive side whether these suggestions will be actually implemented in the next few months. We also want to hear updates from the different agencies who have been implementing several mitigating measures, the unconditional cash transfer, the pantawid pasada, also the monitoring. No? In very volatile situations like this, monitoring is also very important. No? A lot of traders, businessmen will take advantage of this type of situation. Again, we would like to emphasize that we want to look for solutions. We want to look for immediate solutions that we can implement in the next 90 days. And hopefully, maramdaman po yung impact ng ating mga kababayan sa pagpigil ng pagtaas po ng presyo. With that, we would like to start off with the Bangko Sentral, and I would like to personally thank the Deputy Governor for being present in all of our hearings. Thank you, Deputy Governor. I know you're a very busy person, but your presence here really gives a lot of credence to the government's action against inflation. And thank you very much for personally coming over and participating in this hearing. We will let the government agencies present, and then later on we will ask the academe. Professor Mapa is also here. Professor Mapa has been tracking down the inflation of the poor, or the bottom 30%. As we all know, the inflation, no, yung pagtaas ng presyo na nararamdaman po ng pinakamahirap nating kababayan, iba, no, sa nararamdaman ng ordinaryong pamilya. And Professor Mapa has done countless analysis and studies on the inflation of the poor, and we want to understand what the poor is feeling as we speak. And then later on, we will hear from the different line agencies kung nasaan na ho tayo pagdating po sa mitigating measures and moving forward. No, what are the things that we can implement, no, to help our poor families. With that, Deputy Governor, we'll give you the floor.
We thought, Mr. Chairman, that we can have just a very few slides to give us the updates on the inflation process that we have been seeing since the beginning of 2018. We shared the view, Mr. Chairman, that inflation is a very critical issue today. It is no less than an implicit tax on the purchasing power of our people, and therefore it's also an implicit tax on public welfare, and that nobody can deny. It hits everyone, Mr. Chairman, especially the fixed income group, so we cannot overemphasize the very critical importance of our discussion this morning as convened by the Honorable Chairman. So on the part of government, this is indeed a priority concern. So we want to just to provide some updates on the sources and drivers of inflation. Second, we want to distinguish between year-on-year versus month-on-month, just to tell us the idea about the momentum of inflation in the last few months. Thirdly, what are the mitigating measures that have been put in place, and what else can be done both by the government and the private sector. And finally, what is our outlook? Our outlook is very important, Mr. Chairman, because that will define the extent of policy and probably the kind of measures, mitigating measures that we need to undertake. Now, the first chart, Mr. Chairman, emphasizes the supply side factors driving inflation. And those in the red, presented in red font, actually shows the tax components of inflation. Indeed, year-on-year inflation went up from 5.2% to 5.7%. But basically, again, these are driven by, one, rising food prices because of weather conditions, and therefore, if this is coming from the supply side, we can expect that this is non-persistent, and by 2019 and 2020, we should be seeing lower base effects. Second, Mr. Chairman, again, higher excise tax on sweetened drinks and scheduled increases in excise tax of tobacco products. That's 2 pesos and 50 centavos July of 2018. And then 3, higher generation charges and increase in water rates. And finally, we have also seen the provisional increase in minimum jeepney fares of 1 peso for NCR, regions 3 and 4. These are the 4 major drivers of inflation for July of 2018, Mr. Chairman.
Deputy Governor, can you repeat the 4 again? No? Just
One is the rising food prices because of the weather. Second, higher excise tax, sweetened beverages, fuel, and the scheduled increase in tobacco. That's 2 pesos and 50 centavos starting in July of 2018. Number 3 is higher generation charges and increase in water rates. And finally, approved provisional increase in minimum jeepney fares of 1 peso for NCR, regions 3 and 4. So from January to July of 2018, Mr. Chairman, the average inflation rate is now 4.5%. The target of government through the DBCC, as used in the budget, is on an average basis, not on a monthly basis. So average January to July is 4.5%. So it's a 0.5 percentage point higher than the upper end of the target of the government. Mr. Chairman, the next chart will show to us the transitory factors which have been evident in the month-on-month inflation figures. It is true that year-on-year, we hit 5.7% in July. That's 5.7, the highest in about 5 years. But if we look at the month-on-month, we will see that month-on-month has actually been coming down. From January up to May, 0.9 in January, 0.7 in February, March and April, both at 0.5, and then by May, it's 0. Okay? This is before the Bangko Sentral started moving by increasing the policy rate by 25 basis points in May. So we have seen that in terms of the supply side, the effects are actually transitory. However, in June, when inflation hit 5.2, and this is something that is not expected both by the markets and the government, it surged by 0.6. So from 0, month-on-month, in May, Mr. Chairman, it went up to 0.6. But in July, when year-on-year went up to 5.7, the actual month-on-month actually came down to 0.5. So 0.6 to 0.5. That actually emphasizes the transitory nature, Mr. Chairman, of the effects on inflation. Now, the next chart, Mr. Chairman, actually shows the contribution of train to inflation. And based on our computation, Mr. Chairman, of the 5.7% inflation in July 2018, about 0.7 percentage point can be attributed to train. So that's about 12.2% of 5.7%. But Mr. Chairman, it is very difficult to track the indirect impact. That's only the direct impact of train on prices. But the direct impact, like higher food prices on account of higher oil, it may be very challenging to establish that. But be that as it may, I think at this point, we can say that of the 5.7% inflation in July, about 0.7. But that means there is indirect impact on inflation. Okay.
Deputy Governor, let me just cut you off quickly. So what you're saying is, out of the 5.7, 0.7 is attributable to train.
On the basis of one, the inflation of each of the direct components of the train times their weight or their contribution in the consumer basket, and that's the 0.7 out of the 5.7. However, the indirect impacts, which may be heavier or weightier, Mr. Chairman, may not be easy to establish at this point.
Is it correct to say if we suspend train, we will shave off immediately 0.7% of that 5.7%?
On the basis of these numbers,
On the basis of
Mr.
this
Chairman.
number.
Yes.
DG, yung indirect, pwede niyo pong explain ng mas masinsin yung direct tsaka indirect.
Okay.
Are we saying direct meaning sa presyo ng produkto?
Yes,
Indirect.
yes, Mr. Chairman.
If it's, for example, fertilizer, transport cost of fertilizer,
Yes.
is that a direct or indirect?
Ano yan eh, ang fertilizer
Kasi fertilizer po sa food yan, di ba?
sa
Opo.
food.
Mm.
So yung impact unang-una, tumaas muna yung langis.
Yes.
Okay. So tataas ngayon yung transport cost.
That's direct.
That's the direct.
Okay.
Ngayon, ang indirect nun, pero yung direct, yung pagtaas muna nung langis.
Okay.
So
Pump price.
Pasok na kagad yun sa inflation.
Alright.
Pero yung impact nung pagtaas nung langis, doon sa halimbawa fertilizer, at saka doon sa food,
That's indirect.
etc. Those are the indirect
Okay.
impact.
So we don't have the exact computations of the indirect as of now.
We can try, Mr. Chairman, but it's a long process. But we will try, and perhaps in future engagement with the Senate, we can provide some.
Well,
some
Thank you,
numbers.
DJ, no, for that statement, because yun rin po yung contention ng marami ho sa amin dito, na yung analysis natin is focusing on the direct,
That's right.
which is basically pump price,
Yeah.
pamasahe. Those are all direct inflation results, no, from train. But yung hindi natin talaga nakikita, yung tinaas ng transport cost ng fertilizer na input sa ating mga pagkain at yung epekto noon sa food price. So may
Yung pa nga
epekto
po
pa rin
yung
doon.
after that first order effect, dahil sa tumaas yung presyo ng ibang bilihin, kung mayroong pagtaas naman halimbawa ng wage dahil ang
Oho.
various labor groups will be asking for adjustment of the minimum wage.
That's also
O kaya
indirect.
yung transport cost
Opo.
tataas. So pamasahe naman ang tataas. So yun ho yung tinatawag naming second round effects. And therefore, demand pressures may be building up.
Yes.
That's the time that the central bank with its monetary policy will start moving. So yan po yung dahilan kung bakit noong January, February, March, April, hindi ho nag-move ang Bangko Sentral. Because nakita namin na yung second round effects became more apparent only towards the second quarter of 2018.
Right.
Kung mag-move ka agad ang Bangko Sentral, may tama naman ang real sector. That's the balancing act of monetary policy.
Opo. Thank you, DG. Can I ask DOF, no, ASEC Lambino? And to be fair, wala ka naman nung panahong yon. It was Yusek Carl that we were talking about. No, we were discussing this issue about. In the computations and assumptions of DOF, when you passed Train 1, nung pinush nyo po yung Train 1, were these indirect effects considered? Or you were only looking at the direct effect? Because I remember having a conversation, I think si Senator Win also remembers this conversation with Yusek Carl, na ang itataas ng inflation because of train is only up to 0.7. And in fact, he made the claim that we would not reach 4% inflation because hanggang 0.7 lang yung madadagdag dahil po sa train. And we were at 3.2, magiging 3.9 maximum yan. And many of us were saying, that's the direct, yan yung pagtaas ng pump price. Pero yung baka hindi pa nakikita, yung epekto niyan sa pagkain, epekto niyan sa mga goods in the market. So when you initially were pushing for Train 1, and of course you can ask anyone in DOF, was that considered? Kasama ba yun sa initial computation ninyo, yung indirect increase in prices?
Yeah. Thank you, Honorable Senator. I just conferred with colleagues who were around at the time, and the computation was based on direct. And the number that was shared during the time was around 0.7.
Yes.
Just as you shared. But in addition to the 0.7, and you mentioned that Yusek Carl said that it would not breach
4%.
4%. But he also did say, and we looked at the transcripts, that that is barring any major unexpected issues in the weather and the like. And
Okay.
unfortunately, we have experienced those in terms of weather issues affecting supply in agriculture and fisheries and the like. Although DA is here and they can they can confirm whether that is
Weather
an
patterns.
accurate statement.
Okay, so we're blaming the weather now
No,
for
not
our
at all.
inflation.
No, we are actually attributing some of the supply issues in agriculture products to the start of the typhoon season, for instance, in terms of the high price of vegetables in June, and some of the other major crops. That being said, Mr. Senator, we also would like to share with the honorable committee that in addition to the 30% of incremental revenues that were earmarked to help low-income families adjust, no, to the higher prices. And the 30% out of 89.9 billion in incremental revenues, that's the estimate for the year of 27 billion. In addition to that, there are around 122 billion pesos that have been appropriated and are being spent on various social mitigating measures. So the total, that the President reported to Congress during the State of the Nation was around 149 billion pesos in social mitigating measures. That is way above the 27 billion that is required under the train law.
No, but that amount includes the GA amount, or that's the amount because of collections from train?
No, that is amount from all the measures that we looked at based on the GAA.
All right. So, but that comes every year, eh, no? So I think 80 billion of that is the 4-piece. Am I correct? DBM, Director Toledo. Magkano ho yung 4-piece budget natin ngayon sa GA? 60 billion?
Around that, Mr. Chair, yes.
60 or 80?
60 to 80. I'll
All
just
right.
check. Give
So-
me the number, official.
Yes. So anywhere from 60 to 80 is really there. Nandiyan na yan with or without train, no? And hindi yata fair to say na that's because of the train collections, because nandiyan naman yan kada taon.
Actually, just to
sige.
share more
Sige po.
information on that. Actually, Mr. Senator and Honorable Chairman, the 149 billion does not include the 4-piece program.
Sige. So sa 149 billion, how much of that are you attributing to collections from train? And how much of that is a yearly budget?
The percentage of the incremental revenues from train, as stated in the train law, that is reserved, earmarked for social mitigation measures is 27 billion. The reason why I shared the 149, Mr. Senator, is because there are many other programs that are being run, that are currently already underway, that are designed to help those who are affected by the higher prices.
All right. Sige. So, I mean, that's not naman under contention, no? There really are these budget items, no? But just going back, can we request DOF if there will be a third hearing here, no? I don't know if the chairman wants to have a third hearing. Can we do a computation on the indirect effect of train with regard to inflation as well? Because ang binabanggit lang natin, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, 0.4 lang nga ata yung, isn't the DOF position 0.4? Your position is 0.4, right? Not even 0.7, di ba?
Mr. Senator, we actually did compute the direct at 0.4, although we have also conferred with our colleagues at BSP and DBM and NEDA, and the view is that it's anywhere from 0.4 to 0.7 percentage points.
What was the difference? Where is the 0.3 that you did not look at, that they looked at, which is the reason for the 0.3 difference?
We'll have to look at that more closely, Mr. Senator, in terms of the input-output tables.
Yun na nga,
We'll have
diba?
to look at...
So, meaning there were some
percent.
items which they considered which you did not consider, no? Correct.
That's possible, Mr.
Yeah.
Senator, but we'll get to the bottom of it and share the information with you.
All right. So, we would like to know, so firstly, what's the difference between the 0.4 and the 0.7? And secondly, ano po yung computation natin sa indirect? Because there are times when the indirect is actually larger than the direct. Because yung indirect can grow exponentially because all products, and again, I hate to say this, but this was largely discussed. No, napag-usapan to many times during the hearings, privately, publicly, on the record, off the record. Marami ho talagang mga produkto, kung di man lahat ng produkto, maapektuhan kapag tumataas po yung diesel and gasoline natin. No? So, I think that's a very key assumption that was maybe not shared enough to the Senate panel when we were discussing this. Because obviously, you have to look at both the direct and indirect effect of a law. Hindi pwede yung direct lang. And maybe this is also the reason why we're always coming to disagreements, no? Because the common experience for people is it's parang it seems to be more than just 0.4, no? And now we have 0.7, and now we're saying di naman pala kasama yung indirect. So maybe we're coming closer to a better number, which is probably more or closer to the experience of Filipinos. So mas malapit sa totoong karanasan ng mga tao na parang biglaan talaga itong pagtaas na to, no? Mr. Chairman.
Deputy Governor, you're raising your hand.
Mr. Chairman. The first one is oil prices. Last year, when we were doing all of these exercises, oil prices based on Dubai were only averaging about $51. At the end of 2017, oil prices were hovering about $57, $58. And then we all know that today it's between $72, $75. So we are seeing here a $25 increase in oil prices. Now, based on our preliminary sensitivity analysis, Mr. Chairman, for every 1 percentage point in terms of higher global oil prices, that can increase inflation, domestic inflation, by about 0.03%. Now, considering that $25 per barrel is around 47%, that would translate to more than 1 percentage point. So I think that 5.7%, Mr. Chairman, may also be largely due to the significant increase in oil prices. Nagkataon na talagang may train, and then you have oil prices plus the weather. Yun po yung driver ngayon ng inflation. And of course, this is something that we also need to recognize.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, no, 2 points, DG.
Yeah.
Unang-una, mahirap pong tanggapin from where we are na hindi ho alam ng ating economic team ang forecast ng presyo po ng crudo sa mundo. Because we've also talked to the private sector, and many times the private sector will say, ang presyo po ng crudo goes up and down in a 7-year cycle. And if you are able to track the ups and downs of crude historically and in the world, makikita naman na meron talagang pagtaas na nangyayari ngayon. Now, the first time that train was suggested to government, and you were still there, I was still there, this is 2014 by the World Bank, if I'm not mistaken, no? Yung presyo po ng crudo sa mundo noon, 35. And we were experiencing a very low pump price. Kaya siguro may confidence sila na i-push itong taxes na ito. And in fact, if I'm not mistaken again, the first time it was suggested, it would kick in when it goes below a certain level. So at that time, I think it was 40. If the price of crude, pag bumaba po ng 40, the excise tax will kick in, pump price will not be affected. So instead na bababa yung pump price sa merkado, meron kang taxes na kinokolekta. Kapag pataas siya, it goes above 40, the excise tax is not in play. That was, if I'm not mistaken again, the original version of train. Hindi siya dagdag dun sa presyo. It was actually a mechanism where you could create some space kapag bumababa yung presyo ng crudo sa merkado. Okay, number one. Number two, I can't accept or siguro ang hirap pong isipin o tanggapin na hindi naman nag-forecasting po yung ating mga economic managers because the private sector is able to forecast that we're on an upward trend. We're in the 4th year, according to them, we're in the 4th year of a 7-year upward trend. Meaning, and I'm sure everyone's done their research already, that the price of crude may go up and down a little bit, pero in the next 3 years, pataas pa rin po yan. It's still going up. Now, ang tanong, is it really the best idea to focus on, and the largest part of our collections from train are the excise taxes on fuel, kung nilalagay po yan sa panahon na mataas ang presyo ng krudo, mataas ang presyo ng gasolina at diesel, at pataas pa ito. And that's been my contention. No? In the last hearing, I requested if you could take a second look at the bill that we filed, yung bawas presyo bill na simple lang naman. Kapag mataas yung inflation, we suspend any increases in our excise taxes. Pag nag-normalize yung inflation, hopefully by next year, baka pwede hong ibalik. No? But again, simple lang. Bakit tayo nagtataas ng gasolina at diesel sa panahon na aminado tayong napakataas nito? It doesn't make any sense. Maghanap tayo ng mga ibang bagay na mababa. Baka yun ho yung pwede nating buwisan. But currently, nasa 72, 73 dollars per barrel tayo. At ang expectation ho nila, it will breach 80 and above. No, ang expectation po, tataas pa po yan in the next 2 or 3 years. Is it really the best time to put on an excise tax on fuel? No? DG?
I'm not going to challenge the senator with respect to the fiscal aspects of when to impose excise taxes. And I think the senator really makes a very good point. But let me just say that, yes, while there is a 7-year cycle involved in forecasting oil prices, I think nobody ever realized that it is possible for both OPEC members and non-OPEC members to agree on a production cutback. I think this is the first time that these two groups, both OPEC producers and non-OPEC producers, decided to reduce production of oil. And as a result, oil prices start surging up. This is the first time. Second, while it is true that oil prices have this 7-year cycle, the number of oil rigs in the Mexican Gulf actually came down because of certain weather conditions in Mexico, as well as in that area of the in that Gulf. And as a result, there was really a decline, both particularly in the supply of oil. Shale production from the U.S. Is barely catching up, Mr. Chairman. And at the same time, in 2018, global demand actually went up. On the basis of the study in the EIA, this is the Energy Industry Association, by 2019, they expect that supply will exceed demand by a slight amount. Today, for 2018, is the reverse. Demand is higher than supply. And we are seeing this increase in oil prices. So this was not part of the expectation in 2018, and as a result, our assumption was lower. That's where we are coming from, Mr. Chairman.
Well, okay. And again, baka pinapangunahan ko tong second part ng hearing natin. Pero nandito na tayo eh. Nandito na tayo sa panahon na $72 per barrel yung crudo, nandito na tayo na 5.7% yung inflation, nandito na po tayo. At yung hinahanap natin, solusyon, no? And I think when we coordinated with Senator Win's office, he said that we'll be focusing on the solutions today. Hence, DA is here. Hence, is DENR here? Or DOTR to talk about the Euro 2, probably, no? Yung Pantawid, I don't know if anyone here is to talk about the Euro 2, Euro 4 issue, but these are all the proposed solutions to stave off the prices. Okay? And that's what we're talking about today. I'll go back and say, marami ho tayong mga pinopropose, pero hindi ba parang ayaw lang nating nasa harap na ho natin yung target, ayaw nating i-bullseye yung target. And for me, simple lang, ang pinaka-bullseye na target is it's not the right time to have the excise taxes on fuel because mataas nga ang presyo ng crudo sa mundo. Parang it's the most obvious thing, no? Mataas yung presyo sa crudo sa mundo, hindi natin inaasahan, I'll take it, hindi natin inaasahan, pero nandito na tayo. So anong gagawin natin? Pipilitin pa rin natin yan. And in 4 months, DG, we'll have another increase of 2 pesos for diesel and 2 pesos for gasoline. And simply put, nabanggit ko po ito sa DBCC, I think you were there also, sabi ko, and Tony was there also, sabi ko, mamimilipit yung gobyerno to find a way to stop that increase in January. Because once you do another 2 pesos on diesel and gasoline in January, I can see kung paano bababa po yung inflation natin. Parang nilagyan mo na naman ng pangsiga yung sunog, no? So, we need to find a way to stop that. It could come to a point, even if we hit 80 by October, it might not be enough to suspend kasi baka hindi yung 3 buwan. And we know that 3 months means kahit bumaba, tumaas siya, yung 3 months natin hindi mafulfill, no? So, we will be looking for a way, and this is my fearless forecast, we will be looking for a way to suspend the increases in January. Kasi parang di na po yata makatarungan sa tao na nagdadadag tayo sa panahon na napakataas yung presyo ng diesel at gasolina. And we also know that legislation takes time. That's why maaga pa lang sinasabi ko na maghanap na tayo ng mekanismo to be able to suspend that increase in January. And ako nga, pati nga i-roll back yung mga dinagdag ng 2018. Now, the bill itself, the law itself, is not averse to safeguards because there is a safeguard. And I've said this multiple times, yung pumasa po sa Senado, dalawa po yung safeguard, based on price of crude per oil and based on inflation. Yung natira sa final version, at hindi ko pa rin alam kung bakit nawala yung isa, is based on crude, price of crude per barrel, dollar per barrel, na $80 per barrel. Ang sinasabi ko lang, ibalik natin yung safeguard on inflation, so we will have a reason to suspend in January. Can government just to choose to suspend the law? Is that possible? I don't think it's possible, no? You'll be in violation of the law. Can they just say, huwag na tayo mag-suspend? Pwede ba yun? Is that possible, Tony?
Honorable Senator, I think that is really the arena of legislative action. That being said, if I may just share a few
Yes,
points
please.
about what you shared. The estimates of our international development organizations, including the World Bank, at the time that train was being deliberated in the House and the Senate, were actually did not forecast the price that we see today. Even international organizations did not forecast this. We look more closely at the 7-year cycle that you talked about earlier. Second, the latest World Bank estimate for next year, and the next estimate will come out in September, so this is a few months old, but they said that oil will be at around $65 per barrel next year. Also, if we look at the numbers carefully, the amount of price increase in petroleum products that is attributable to train, again, because of the excise plus the VAT on the excise, is between 20 to 26% of the price increase. As DG has mentioned earlier, the bulk is really from international oil prices. So, again, to attribute the part of the increase, that is due to train. And having looked at the price pressures of that, the social mitigating measures were designed in order to address those increases. So not to address increases from all sources, such as international oil prices, but to address increases from the additional excise and the VAT on the excise. And that's why the accelerated rollout of the social mitigating measures are very important. Of course, DSWD and DOTR are here to talk more about that. But in addition, there is another, tawag po ninyo kanina, there's a target, and we're looking at it also very closely. And the target actually that the economic managers have recommended to the legislature for serious consideration is the rice tariffication bill, because that will lower the price of rice for everybody, as opposed to the excise on oil that you mentioned earlier, which will really disproportionately benefit the rich if the excise is lowered. The reason for that, Mr. Senator, is because 70% of petroleum products are consumed by the top 20% of the population. 50% of petroleum products are consumed by the top 10% of the population, simply because they have cars and they load up their tanks with 3,000 pesos worth of petroleum whenever they fill up a full
Again,
tank.
that's the direct.
Yes, that's the direct.
So ang tanong nga natin, what's the indirect? Because kapag kinumpute mo na yung indirect, palagay ko makikita mo na yung epekto ng indirect, mas matatamaan yung mahihirap. No, maybe directly, we're talking about cars, SUVs, we've heard all of these arguments before, but indirectly, we're looking at the price of fertilizer, the price of delivering vegetables, the price of the fisherman sa yung motor ng mangingisda pag nangingisda siya. These are all indirect which add to food and add to. So, palagay ko, maybe so we can all talk on the same page, we can compute the indirect or endeavor at least to have a number that focuses on the indirect as well. Now, going back, the reason why my colleagues voted for this is because meron ang social mitigating measure. But we're 8 months into the year. Si Pantawid Pasada has been implemented, Yusek Gary, or about to be.
We are distributing already the
Already?
cards, sir. So by
Okay.
September, we expect that we will be able to give it substantially or not, if not completely distribute the cards.
Okay, so at least after 9 months, nangyari na rin. Si DSWD is still in process. By next month rin yan matatapos. Correct, Mr. Makalalad? Yes. Even the rice tarification, which many of us are not against, the problem with the rice tarification is that it's hinged on a 10 billion support fund for the farmers. Correct? Because ang mangyayari niyan, papasok yung imported na bigas sa ating merkado at tama naman, mas mura siya. So, it will flood the market. Yung farmers naman ho natin yung mahihirapan. Now, ang sinasabi, huwag kayong mag-alala, merong 10 billion na tulong sa inyo. But maybe like the UCT, it will come 8 months late. Like the Pantawid Pasada, it will come 9 months late. In those 9 months, kung hindi ma-deliver yung services na yon, magugutom yung magsasaka natin, no? Correct po, Yusek?
That's correct, Mr. Senator.
So, hindi sapat na sabihing merong social mitigating measure. Kasi una, popondohan mo pa po yan. And now, we all know there's a budget issue between the House and DBM. And although kami, ano lang kami dyan, ano tayo dyan? Spectator lang ba tayo dyan, Senator Win? Or we're letting DBM and the House figure it out, no? But even if it's budgeted, as in the case of the UCT and the case of the Pantawid Pasada, we're still not sure about the implementation. No, let me go back, Mr. Makalalad. Yung study po ng internal study ng DSWD, ano po yung leakage ng 4Ps? Anong porsyento?
Senator Bam, before we answer, no, because kanina na-mention mo if this will be the last hearing, we plan to conduct several more hearings, no, since inflation is an ongoing concern. And we can see from the past that this year has been very volatile in terms of the fluctuations in prices, no. So as long as inflation is an ongoing concern, we plan to conduct several more hearings. And the reason for that also is because I agree with Senator Bam na pagdating ng 2019, meron na naman tayong part 2 nung train 1, no? And this is actually a grave concern for this representation because it will again, no, add, kung sinasabi nga natin, it added 0.4%. Ang fear na maraming tao is, will it add another 0.4% again, no, come 2019? In other words, will this be a cause of the rise in prices of basic commodities again? So this committee will not hesitate to recommend, no, if ever that there are red flags in the part 2 of train 1, this committee will not hesitate to recommend for a postponement or suspension, whether through legislative action or through executive action. Ang importante ho, ma-stabilize yung presyo, no? Dahil nga makikita ho natin, even using the PSA market list, tumataas ho talaga ang presyo, no?
Sorry, Asek, ano po yung leakage rate ng 4Ps?
Sir, since we're talking about 4Ps, the PMT of 2000, we're talking about the PMT used in the 2009. That's about, if I remember correctly, about 23% to inclusion rate and 30% exclusion rate.
Wasn't there a study done by a third party around 2014 or 2013? Di ba may ganoon na parang third party gumawa, hindi internal, na study on 4Ps, Asek? In the previous administration, not 2 administrations ago, hindi mo ba merong study on?
Assessment, sir.
Yes, ng leakage. Ang alam ko, it was anywhere from 15 to 25%, but do you have an official figure on the leakage rate? Sabihin na nating 25%. Is that fair? Is that fair for your organization?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So 25% leakage. So, ibig sabihin, yung UCT natin ng DSWD, and again, mahirap ang trabaho nila. Hindi ko sinasabing hindi nila ginagawa trabaho nila. Mahirap trabaho nila. If you increase it to 10 million, which we've done through the train law, that's 2.5 million Filipinos who will not receive the support that they need because it went to another 2.5 million na iba. No, that's the leakage, di ba? Hindi napupunta sa tamang beneficiary. That's 2.5 million Filipinos who will not receive these social mitigating measures na pangunahing rason kung bakit umuo rin yung mga senador dito. Now, yung pantawid pasada, palagay ko mas kaya kasi may mga organizations po yan, kaya nilang i-cross-check. But the job of DSWD to provide to 10 million Filipinos is very difficult. And with a failure rate of 25% or a leakage rate of 25%, naka-hinge, no? Kumbaga, the social justice aspect of this law is hinged on the social mitigating measure. Aminado naman tayo na may leakage rate rin na 1/4 or 25%. That's 2.5 million Filipinos, no? 2.5 million, families na hindi makakatanggap ng tulong. Now, we go back to the DA. I'm sorry, sir, pero pag ako nag-iikot, uneven yung sinasabi ng mga magsasaka. May mga area, ang rami pong tulong ng DA sa amin. May mga ibang area, wala ko kaming tulong na natatanggap. I think di naman ho yun, will you take offense to that or tanggap nyo naman po yung ganong klaseng assessment?
No, sir. No, we don't take offense with that.
Okay. So, there will be some areas na hindi talaga makakaabot. Yung tanong namin the last time, meron na bang listahan ang ating 1 million farmers in the rice industry, sir? Or 1.3 po ba yun?
We're trying to develop a registry for farmers.
Yes.
There is in fact an RSBSA, but when we proposed this way back in the last administration, DBM took it from us.
Yes.
And it's only now being turned over to us.
Mga ilan po yung numero ho natin ng rice farmers?
Hindi lang po rice farmers. This is
All farmers?
all farmers, including landless workers. The registry now contains something like 13 million.
Kung palay lang po, mga ilan po yan? 2 million, 3 million?
Kung pali po, around 2 million.
Okay, so we're talking about, again, 2 million families na maapektuhan ng rice tariffication. Again, we're not against it, but much like Train 1, ang suggestion ko is before we pull the trigger sa rice tariffication, can we at least ensure na yung ating 2 million rice farmers talagang may suporta sa kanila? Kasi posible ho talaga na itong 10 billion nakaalat, yung rice tariffication mukhang gusto pong madaliin. I don't know if those delivery of services can happen in a month or two. And I think kung di ako nagkakamali, hindi naman direct yung tulong na ibibigay, sa mga implements na naman po yung tulong na maibibigay. So, I don't know, Yusek, internally sa pag-uusap ninyo, kung ano yung mga plano nyo para sa mga rice farmers natin, no? Yusek.
Thank you, Your Honors. Actually, just as a clarification, the rice tariffication bill which we proposed before Congress is actually just tariffication of rice tariff lines. As a matter of fulfilling our already breached obligation because the waiver on rice tariffs before the Committee on Trade in Goods in the WTO has expired more than a year ago. So what we just need to do, Your Honors, is that so that we are not unduly exposed to any disputes because of our breach of obligation, is we just need to tarify rice.
So, hindi nyo po ililift yung quantitative restriction?
Kasi hindi po, malilift po yung quantitative restrictions, i-tarify mo yung rice, pero hindi naman ibig sabihin na wala na tayong measures to, say, regulate the entry of imported rice.
Alright, but hindi ho ba I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, for taking up time, pero hindi ho ba yung prevailing thought is that pag nag-rice tariffication tayo, the tariff, of course, may tariff yan, pero at the end of the day, yung selling price pa rin niya sa merkado, mas mababa dun sa commercial rice ho ngayon. Hindi ho ba ganun yung understanding doon? Kaya nga, the goal is to bring food prices down, no?
That's the general idea, Your Honors, but there must be, it is the position of the department that there must also be regulatory controls on the unbridled entry of rice. And that's why we're looking into, there have been proposals to also look into, to also involve and touch the mandates of NFA, which of course in the, what has happened in the House is that the legal opinion was that you cannot do tariffication and at the same time
tamper with the mandate of NFA. That
You
should be
cannot.
a separate, if your target, Your Honors, is tarification, but in doing so, tarification, dinamay mo, tinuhog mo, pati yung, say, yung mga crucial elements ng mandate ng NFA as amended, which is a presidential decree, which has the force of law, parang dinamay mo lang siya doon sa target mo na tarification. It's our position, Your Honors, that kung mag-tarify na tayo para clear na tayo doon sa obligation na yon. Hindi tayo unduly exposed to disputes. And then let's talk about the mandates of NFA, including import licensing, as a separate issue so that it can be thoroughly discussed.
But your idea is, sa tarification, hindi necessarily na mas mura siya sa... Hindi, I'm a little confused, sir. So, di ba the idea is, pag tinanggal mo yung quantitative restriction, meron kang taripa, whatever it is, ang papasok dito, imported rice, dadami yung imported rice sa merkado na mas mababa. No? At yun naman yung isang goal na mas mapababa yung presyo ng bigas. But at the same time, that's putting at risk our rice farmers. No? Ang sinasabi ho nyo, hindi naman sila at risk because papatas lang po yung presyo.
They will be at risk, Your Honors, if you completely obliterate the regulatory powers of NFA in the rice trade. Because if the idea of tarification is also to fully liberalize, remove all of the barriers, including regulatory barriers, then talaga hong babahain tayo. Kasi mataas yung cost of production natin, mas mababa yung iba, and the competition even in ASEAN is more heavily supported by subsidies than our farmers.
Yes.
So talaga hong babahain tayo. So kailangan, ang sinasabi namin, dapat mag-tarify na muna tayo, and then let's retain adequate control so that we are not unduly flooded by the competition when our farmers are not yet competitive. While we have a rice roadmap, even the indicators of what will be the level of support for 2019 does not support that roadmap, for example, Your Honors. So, and also our stakeholders, not only in rice, say that you want to fully liberalize us or you want to reduce tariffs on our sectors, bigyan nyo kami ng lead time at least 2 years. Hindi yung biglaan nyo kaming iiwanan, pero sasabihin ninyo, next year darating yung suporta ninyo.
Senator Ma'am, with your kind indulgence, we'll just finish first yung presentation ni Deputy Governor, and then we'll go with DOF, and then later on, we'll isa-isahin ho natin yung mga agencies which were mandated to implement mitigating measures.
Very quick, Mr. Chairman, because most of the items have been discussed earlier. That particular chart actually shows inflation expectation by the market. This is one measure by which we see whether second-round effects are already being generated by the initial shocks coming from oil prices, the weather, and even excise taxes. And here we show that for 2018, the market expects and shares the view of government that for 2018, we will be in breach. For 2018, they say it's about 4.7%, but for 2019 and 2020, we will be back to the target consistent path of 3.9% for 2019 and 2020 and for 2020 at 3.8%. The next chart, Mr. Chairman, okay, actually summarizes our discussion earlier on what are the mitigating measures that can help ease the price pressures. One, of course, is the unconditional cash transfer. We were expecting that if this were distributed in the way as scheduled, then this could have eased the interest as well as the desire of the labor group to ask for higher adjustment in wages. Mr. Chairman, in our baseline scenario, we already incorporated an 18 peso per day adjustment in minimum wage. because this is the historical number that we have seen in the past. Now, given the latest numbers of the adjustment in several regions, we are increasing it to 25 pesos per day. So from 18 to 25. And that is already embedded in our new forecast of 4.9% for 2018. Now, fuel prices, I think we have already covered this earlier. I think if Pantawid Pasada can really be implemented as soon as possible, I think this will also help provide some mitigation to price pressure. And of course, on food prices, particularly rice tariffication and the activities of the DTI to make sure that the price tag law is observed by both in the wet market and in the dry goods market. I think this will also help. In case of price tariffication, Mr. Chairman, I think the DA is correct in saying that rice tariffication is one issue, but we can treat the issue of NFA as a regulatory body as another issue. This is something that can wait, but the rice tariffication is something that is urgent. It can provide mitigation to price pressures. On the basis of our numbers, Mr. Chairman, we expect rice tariffication to reduce inflation, if this is going to be implemented by the last quarter of the year, by about 0.2 percentage point. And then in 2019, that can provide some reduction as well by about 0.6 to 0.8 percentage point from inflation. Now, it is true that we need to make sure that our farmers are made competitive so that in case of heavy importation and arrival of imported rice, they can be more competitive. But at the same time, I think we also need to make the point, Mr. Chairman, that farmers are also consumers. So to the extent that rice prices are brought down, the farmers themselves will benefit from lower rice prices. Now, the next chart, Mr. Chairman, shows us the outlook of inflation. We continue to see that while we have upside and downside risks, the shape of inflation now and in the next 2 years is one of a hump-shaped process. That means we expect inflation to peak by around the third quarter, this quarter, probably August or September, and then from there expect this to start coming down to around 3.7% in 2019 and 3.2% in 2020. This is the reason why, Mr. Chairman, we are saying that the supply side continued to be dominant in driving the inflation process. So on the side of the Bangko Sentral, next chart please, on the side of the Bangko Sentral, on the basis of our careful assessment of the drivers of inflation, as well as the outlook of inflation for the next 2 years, we raised our key policy rate thrice in 2018. 25 basis points each on May 10 and June 20, and another 50 basis points last August 9. We observed that the second round effects appear to be more apparent, particularly between July and August, 1. 2, we do not want to risk a breach in 2019 and 2020. So we had to start tightening monetary policy. At the same time, we also recognize that the Philippine economy continues to be resilient and robust to be able to accommodate this tightening measure by the central bank. In other words, the impact on the real sector, on economic activities, could be accommodated by the resiliency as well as the robustness of the Philippine economy, Mr. Chairman. So, moving forward, we would like to reiterate our strong commitment and readiness to take all necessary policy actions to address the threat of high inflation and deliver on our primary mandate of price stability. At the same time, I think we also need to reaffirm to the general public our support for carefully coordinated efforts to implement non-monetary measures to address supply-side nature of the inflation pressures. Mr. Chairman, that actually concludes our brief presentation. And at the same time, just a quick point. I think in the law, there is an 80 peso threshold, $80 threshold for a possible suspension of train. But on the basis of the futures oil prices for 2018, 2019, up to 2020 and 2021, the highest that we can see based on August 7 Dubai oil prices is about $70.56 for the entire year of 2018. For 2019, average is $72.55. 2020 is about $69.50. And 2021 at $66.80. So it's nowhere close to $80 per barrel that would warrant a possible suspension of the excise tax on fuel. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And we recognize the newest member of the Committee on Economic Affairs, Senator Coco Pimentel.
Newest because being the youngest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you po. Just a quick question, Deputy Governor. In the 2019 forecast, no, can we pull up the slides? It was mentioned here that the forecast is 3.9. This includes the train, the second part of train.
Everything,
Kasama na ho to.
not the train 2, the train 1.
The second tranche.
Yes.
The second tranche of train.
Yeah.
Okay. And this also took into account also what earlier mentioned by Senator Bam, the indirect effects of the second tranche of train.
Well, implicitly, yes, Mr. Chairman, because this is driven by our model that has feedback features within that model. So interactions between and among those variables are included in the model.
And also the price of crude, no?
Yes, Mr.
Adverse
Chairman.
weather conditions,
Correct.
naka-factor in na po dito sa 3.9.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and those would reflect the assumptions that we used in the submission of the budget both to the Senate and the House.
So is it correct to say that the 3.9, it's a much conservative figure than what was projected for 2018? Take into account the weather conditions, much higher crude pricing.
Well,
Nakasama na ho
this
dito.
is the, yes, they are inclusive of everything that we know today.
Okay.
But of course, there are upside risks and downside risks, which are not yet apparent at this time. But nonetheless, we want to be more forward-looking and put that in our matrix of upside and downside risks.
Correct, because you're absolutely correct in your opening statement that the forecast will drive policy. No?
That's right, Mr. Chairman.
And including legislative policy. You know, and that's why we want to make sure that the forecast has been prudent and take into account also all the factors that were mentioned earlier for this year. No?
That's right, Mr. Chairman.
Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we create policies based on what is being recommended to
Including
us.
the expected normalization of the U.S. Fed, Mr. Chairman. That's all included in the forecast.
Deputy Governor, to date, no, the average inflation is about 4.5%. No?
That's right, Mr. Chairman.
And does this, in that 4.5, how big is attributable to the train 1?
On the July number of 5.7, the direct impact is 0.7. But with respect to 4.5,
For the average
we
po.
don't have the numbers at this point. Mr.
No,
Chair.
because I'm just making it very simple. No?
Yes.
If it's going to be a 0.4%, so bababa siya, assuming lang 0.4 siya, bababa siya ng 0.1. If it's 8.7, di bababa siya 3.8. No? Then it's well within the target of 2 to 4%. No?
Yeah,
My
yeah.
point there is we still want to isolate the percentage attributable to train
Yeah.
on a year-to-date average. No?
Yeah.
We want to be enlightened with that. And kung wala ho kayong submission, please submit
We
to us
will, we
that.
will
Yeah.
submit the numbers, Mr. Chairman, but the 4.5% average, Mr. Chairman, basically reflects, again, supply-side pressures related to global oil prices, higher excise taxes, weather-related disruptions that affected food prices, and some demand-side pressures as well, considering that the economy was able to sustain its resilient growth, particularly in the second quarter of 2018.
In a very simple explanation, no, and for the information of everyone, I've been hearing the inflation was a supply-side concern. No?
That's right, Mr. Chairman.
It's a supply push, no, in this case. But tightening the monetary policy is really affecting the demand side. No?
That's right, Mr.
So
Chairman.
how does this, what expectation, I'm just managing expectations. No?
Yes.
And the increase of interest rates 3 times this year, no? I think we are now at 100 basis points. No?
The total increase.
The total increase.
That's right. So our policy rate moved from 3 to 4% at this time.
Since tightening monetary policy is normally a demand side effect,
Yes.
how can this increase mitigate inflation or temper inflation?
There are two points, Mr. Chairman. One is that we have seen some broadening of price pressures. We monitor the number of items whose inflation rate exceeded the upper end of the target of 4%. And every month, we take a look at the number of items exceeding that 4%, whose inflation exceeded 4%. And it is going up. That's one. Two, it's the weight, their weight on the consumer basket. And again, it's been increasing. That's one. Two, we have also seen that more and more regions around the country have granted approval of the petition for higher minimum wage. Now, higher minimum wage will definitely influence demand pressure in the economy. Thirdly, we have also seen, and that was done in July last month, a 1 peso provisional increase in the jeepney fares. Again, this will affect demand and will contribute to more pressures on the economy. That's the first point, Mr. Chairman. The other point is that of inflation expectations. Recently, the inflation process can be driven by inflation expectations of what the market expects. And sometimes what the market expects could be self-fulfilling. If people believe that prices will continue to go up on the basis of some analysis of market analysts, then people will believe that and people will start jacking up prices. This is what we want to influence, Mr. Chairman. If they know that the central bank will not allow inflation to move up beyond what we have projected and targeted for, let's say, 2019 and 2020, between 2 to 4%, and we delivered that message with a succession of 25, 25, and 50 basis points adjustment, I think inflation expectations of the general public will be stabilized, and this will also be reflected in the exchange rate. When people expect inflation to be stable, I think their expectations of the exchange rate movement will also reflect that, Mr. Chairman. So that the series of increases in the policy rate by the BSP is really meant to stabilize inflation expectations and in the process provide the so-called forward guidance to the market that inflation will be stable at between 2 to 4% for the next 2 years.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Governor. DOF, ASEC, do you have any presentations to share with us?
Honorable Chairman, if I may ask our colleague from DBM who chairs The agency actually chairs the interagency committee in the delivery of social mitigation measures. If I may ask that Director Toledo. Be asked.
Before we go into the social mitigating measures, I want to ask Dr. Mapa, no, who's been tracking down the inflation of the poor. Doc, do you have any presentation to share with us?
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I have a presentation, just a few slides.
Is that sa ano, kay Dr. Mapa? There. Okay.
Okay, good morning, Mr. Chairman. And well, I'm here to present the issue of the day, which is inflation and its impact on the poorest members of our society. So what I'm highlighting, can I go to the next slide, please? These are the key points that I found in the study. Well, first, for the first 7 months of 2018, the poor, which we define this presentation as the poorest 30% of the population, suffered the most, no, from increasing prices of goods, particularly food items such as rice. And I will show that based on our estimates, we have higher inflation for poorest households. And in the previous years wherein we are counting the poor, because I would like to highlight 2018 is a family income and expenditure survey year wherein we're going to count. In fact, we already started counting or estimating the income and expenditure of households, which is a key input to our poverty incidence. And based on our simulation, our current cash transfer, as provided by the train law, is not enough to compensate the effect on the poorest 30%. Next slide, please. The reason why we have I'm going to present a different computation or a different inflation rate number. First, we have to look into the different weights in the basket of the poorest 30% and what was reported a while ago by the Deputy Governor, which is the headline inflation. No? So what is reported is the headline inflation, and in that case, using 2012, I already made an estimate here so that we can have the same base year. PSA can verify this later. For the headline inflation, 38% of the expenditure is spent on food and non-alcoholic beverages. That's our average household. But if you look at the poorest 30% of the household, 61% is spent on food. Okay? That's the main major expenditure item. And as we saw, the last 7 months, food inflation spiked up. So food inflation is really high. The second one, second important item there is the housing, water, electricity, and other fuels, and then transport. So these are the three major items for the poor households. Next slide, please. I'll go to the next slide for the graph. So this is the estimate of the inflation rate. The red line is the headline inflation rate, average of 4.5. But the blue bar is basically the inflation rate of the poorest 30%. So in July, the inflation rate actually is estimated to be 6.7. And the average for 7 months, while inflation rate is 4.5, the inflation rate of the poorest 30% is about 5.3. Okay? So you have more or less about 1 percentage point higher than the average inflation. The next slide will actually be showing us the deciles. No? So you have the poorest 10%, the next 10%, and so on. So you will notice that the bars there, the orange, that's the poorest 10% of the household. The gray line is the second decile, and the yellow bar is the third decile. You have really higher inflation rate, particularly in July, averaging about 6.7% versus 5.7 for the average household inflation rate. Next slide, please. So one of the drivers, of course, of inflation rate, as also mentioned, is rice. And I try to look at the train law, page 95. There is an item there that says that we have to have discounted rice for, from NFA. And it stated there that discounted purchase of NFA rice from accredited retail stores in the amount equivalent to 10% of the retail price with maximum of 20 kilos. So I tried to compute that you know, a poor household starting January 1 can purchase 20 kilos at 32 pesos per kilo, discounted 10%, so that would be about 28.80, 29. But in reality, from January to June, the average price of rice is 39 pesos, okay, because there's no NFA rice. So in a way, government should reimburse the poor household 200 pesos per month. That is 10 pesos gap in the price of rice from the promise to the actual times 20 kilos. So that is part of the input that I said the cash transfer is not enough, because those other items were not considered in the computation. Next slide, please. Inflation rate is really a critical constraint to poverty reduction efforts. In the past, we have seen that there are two very important ingredients for reduction, poverty reduction. One is high income growth among the poor households, and the other one is low inflation rate. So in the previous family income and expenditure survey starting 2006, we track what happened to the income growth of the poorest 30% and their inflation rate. So the summary is presented in the next slide. Next slide, please. So here, using 2006 as our base year, in 2009, growth rate of income of the poorest 30% of the household was about 8.2%. So in that year, we had relatively high income growth for the poorest 30% of the household. However, this is the aftermath of the global oil crisis of 2008 and the rice crisis of 2008. Inflation rate was 5.4 that time. So you have high growth rate, high inflation rate, poverty incidence from 2006 to 2009 is almost the same. No significant reduction. In 2012, we had low growth rate among the poorest 30%, 3.5 average. Low inflation rate during that year, 2.9. No significant reduction. Okay? It was only in 2015 wherein we had relatively high growth rate, 7.4%, and low inflation, 1.6. And thus, we have this significant reduction from 19.7% among families to 16.5%. So here, during this last several FIES, we noted that poverty reduction would occur only when you have relatively high growth rate and low inflation rate. Now, our forecast for the inflation rate of the poorest 30% will range between 5.5 to 6 this year. And that is almost the same as 2009. So unless we have a really, really high growth rate of income among the poorest 30%, I don't think we will have a significant reduction in poverty incidence this year. No? We started already the first round of the family income and expenditure survey last July 9, and PSA very soon will come up with the first semester report. Next slide, please. Now, we looked at as our leading indicator during years wherein we really had higher prices. We look at the self-rated poverty incidence of SWS.
And in the past, this seems to be a good indicator of what will happen in the official count, no, which is being reported by the Philippine Statistics Authority. And in the second quarter of 2018, separated poverty, as reported by the Social Weather Station, increased significantly by 6 percentage points. So in our analysis, we feel that this is a glimpse of what will happen in the official poverty count for 2018. Next slide, please. Now, I presented this particular computation in the February hearing, and I argue that the current cash transfer of 200 pesos is not enough for two reasons. One, the effect of inflation among the poor household is really high. It's estimated to be between 5.5 to 6 this year. The previous year is just 3.1, so almost double. Second is that the current cash transfer is computed under the assumption that the family size is 5. And we all know from the data of DSWD, it is rare to see a poor household with 5 members. The fertility rate of the poorest 20% is 5. So the average is 7. So in other words, the computation, the assumption of cash transfer using 5 members is really an underestimation. So this suggestion is just telling us that we have to consider family size as an input in the computation of the cash transfer. Okay? I think that's all my presentation, Mr. Chair. Good morning.
Thank you, Dr. Mapa. Dr. Mapa, what basically you're saying is the inflation of the poor, no, which is the bottom 30%, mas malaki siya kaysa sa ordinaryong pamilya.
Yes. Basically because the increase in the inflation comes from food items.
The food, because they consume more food,
61%.
61% compared to the ordinary family. And out of that food, those food items, no, ilan ho doon ang bigas?
The rice, 61%. Rice is about 20% of that 61%. About 1/3.
About 1/3 of that 60%. But in the total basket, what is rice?
Rice
for the
is
poor?
about 1/5 of the total basket of the
About
poorest
1/5.
30%. Yeah.
Okay. About 20%. So in other words, an increase in the price of rice will directly impact the poorest households.
Yeah, the actual data from PSA, I think, using the 2000 base for the first semester, this year rice contributed about 0.5, half percentage point in the inflation rate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And can we go back to doon sa presyo ng bigas, no? I saw there. Ito pong in the train law, no, there is a
Page 95 of the
correct, you know, there's a mitigating provision. There's a provision there to do to achieve mitigating measures. In your analysis, so has this been met?
Well, first 6 months, wala talaga, no? Sa ngayon, there are areas wherein you have the NFA rise, but I don't think it is covering what is stated there in the law, that poor household, as identified by the SWD, will get the 10%. In fact, those that are buying from NFA retail stores, they're not getting the 10% discount. So this one, actually, that small item on page 95 was lost in the implementation.
So this is actually giving false hopes to our poor families.
I think in the implementation of the social protection, this one, I don't know whether somebody noticed this, that there is a 10% discount.
I just want to, it's nasa batas ho to eh, no? It's in the law. I just want to ask the, andito ba ho yung NFA? No? NFA, ma'am, because we discussed this during the first hearing. No, I think that was first quarter of this year, and at that time there were plans of bringing in 250,000 tons of rice, no, to precisely to address the necessities of the poor, no, kasi nga 1/5 or 20% ng kanilang ginagastos sa bigas po pumupunta. But to date, I was looking at the numbers, ang presyo ho ng bigas hindi ho bumababa, no? In fact, tumaas pa ho siya. Yung NFA na dapat ho maging available sa mga mahirap nating kababayan, hindi naman po available, no? In fact, before over the weekend, I asked my staff to go around the different markets in Valenzuela. Wala ho silang makitang NFA rice, no? No. Ewan ko kung mabilis ho maubos or yung mga retailers po ay limited, no? But wala ho silang makita at that time. Now, yung 250,000, in effect, wala hong nangyari, no? But in the if you look at the increase in prices, ho, wala hong price pressure na nangyari ho. So ano ho yung assessment ho ninyo?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and honorable members of this committee. We can say that we have already participation in mitigating the effects of the train law because, sir, during the last hearing that we had, we reported in this committee that we had already contracted the purchase of actually 500,000 metric tons of rice from Thailand and Vietnam, and through the private sectors who have bidded. And for now, the status of our arrivals on that imported rice is at the warehouses, we have 195,780 metric tons, or equivalent to 3,915, 600 bags. And at port, we have 112,712 metric tons, or equivalent to 2,254,240 bags. So the total deliveries that have been made is about 6,169,840 metric tons. Today, Your Honors, we are distributing 58,755 daily. And this is about 9% market participation. We are selling 8,000 bags daily to the marginalized sector at the rate of 27 pesos per metric ton, per kilogram. So with the study of the UP, we can say that the rate that they are saying is 28.80 per kilograms should be to the port. The NFA is selling 27 pesos per kilogram, sir. So which is even lower than the 28.80 if we base the discounted rate of 32 pesos. Because the NFA has two priced rice. We have the 32 pesos, sir, which is a better quality, and the 27 pesos per kilogram.
Ma'am, hindi ho implemented yung 10% discount na yan.
Not yet,
No,
Your
it's not.
Honors.
So there
It's
is
not
no such
yet-
thing as a 28.80. And even if you were selling at 27, it should still be 10% less than that. Yun ho yung nasa batas. No, that's what's in the law. Now, ang contention po namin dito, that's not being implemented. This was a law passed in January of 2017. Marami po sa mga social mitigating measures, di naman po napatupad, including the late UCT, the late Pantawid Pasada, ito pong 10% discount on NFA rice, yung 10% discount sa fares. Marami hong nakalagay dyan, and they're hardly implemented, no? And that's why ramdam na ramdam. I think yun yung point ni Dr. Mapa, no? Ramdam na ramdam kasi hindi nga po siya napapatupad. Just very quick question, ilang days cover po yan? Yung meron ho tayo ngayon?
38 days, Your Honor. If we are selling at that volume daily, we still can sell in 38 days for the NFA rice alone. Your Honors, we have not actually implemented the discounted rate We sell 27, which is a subsidized price, because it's the DVM who should provide us fund to be able to implement a discounted rate of, if we base on the 27 kilogram of NFA rice, we should be selling at a discounted price of 2.70. Yes, Your Honor. But in our previous meetings with the Department of Budget and Management, we are not provided with a fund, but and we were not also informed of this during the meetings on the passage of train law.
Ma'am, I think I'm not the only one who observed, no, that availability of, or the lack of availability of NFA rice in the market. In fact, reality, poor household buying 39 pesos per kilo commercial rice because NFA rice is unavailable, no? And I think, aside from the UP School of Statistics, kami rin po, I did my rounds, talagang hindi ho siya available. And at the same time, the numbers will speak for itself, no? July inflation of rice went up by 5%. Ngayon, ang tanong ko lang ho, very basic. Assuming available po yung NFA rice sa retailers, paano ho nalalaman kung mahirap ho talaga ang bumibili?
We have no basis for that, Your Honor. But can I address your first statement, Your Honor?
Before that, no, so is there a way for NFA, no, or for any agency for that matter, na malalaman ho natin ang bumibili ho yung pinakamahirap nating mga kababayan?
Sir, for the 27, we bring it to them. We are conducting rolling stores for the 27 pesos in the,
But anyone
the
can,
remote areas.
marami hong pipila. Nakita ko sa TV, maraming pumipila. But how do we know that the buyers are the poorest families of that area?
Your Honor, it may not be the poorest of the poor, but of course the rich one would not be falling in line with those priced rice, the low-priced rice.
But how do we, that's an assumption that we, no, but how do you, the basic question is, how do you know, among all those people lining up, kung sino doon mahirap, sino may kaya, I just want to know. No?
The first area naman, sir, yung mga situations where we put our outlets, nandun po, sir, sa mahihirap talaga.
But can we pinpoint exactly kung sino doon ang mahirap o hindi? I just want to know, ma'am.
Actually, honestly, sir, we have no basis.
So there's no way to pinpoint whether the buyers of NFA are the poorest families, no? There's no targeted methodology in reality po.
In reality, sir, we put our outlets, accredited outlets, in the markets, in areas where we have the residents of the low income people.
But there's no targeted method. No? Wala
We
tayong
have
ganyan.
targeted method by distributing through our programs and rolling stores, sir. Sir, may I just address the statement that you have made earlier? In connection with the study of the UP School of Statistics, they based their studies from January to June of this year, which is the first quarter. During the meeting that we have made during the last hearing of this committee, we have reported that we have no NFA rice at that time. And that is the reason why the people could not feel the effects of the presence of NFA rice at that time.
Well, yes, and we've had hearings in the past na naubos nga po yung NFA rice, no? So, I think that's not being contested. But, siguro, just to make a point, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, Attorney Dansal. Yung NFA rice ho kasi, iba yung NFA rice na galing sa mga magsaka natin, iba yung NFA rice na ini-import ninyo. Tama, no? Obviously. Many of us here would prefer that NFA uses the rice of our local farmers. I think the DA would also prefer that, no? And in previous hearings, napag-usapan na kung paano pwedeng itaas yung binabayaran ninyo sa mga magsasaka natin para yung supply natin ng NFA days cover hindi ho tayo dependent lang sa importation. No? I think we've made that clear in previous hearings already. But ito pong na-import ninyo, is it Vietnam or Thailand?
Both, Your
Both,
Honor.
okay. Kung the same klaseng rice ho, na-import ho ng trader, magkano ho yung benta niya niyan sa merkado? They're not selling it at 27.
Yes, Your Honor. We cannot monitor their prices because they are already commercialized and
No.
the government is not.
Okay, let's ask si Yusek Serrano, baka mas alam niya. Yung klase ho ng bigas na ini-import po ng NFA, kapag yan po ay in-import ng isang trader, magkano po yun sa merkado?
Wala po kaming precise
Yeah,
ano
but
rin.
ballpark po, 40?
Siyempre po susundin nila kung ano yung domestic prices. Mga ganun po, 40. Kung
Mga
halim-
40.
Ang rough rule of thumb po, kung ang domestic palay po natin, ang farm gate ay binibili po ng 20, mga 40 po ang ano niyan, ang
Okay.
dating sa retail.
So, yung local ho kasi na binibili po sa mga farmers natin, iba po yung market dynamics niyan dun sa imported na NFA rice, no? Because, kumbaga may katumbas po yan na commercial rice. It's practically the same, if I'm not mistaken. It's the same source, the same variant, the same kind, kaya lang dun sa commercial, it's selling at 40 or 38. Sa inyo, it's selling at 27. So, my point ho yung, hindi na ho kayo sigurado kung sino po yung bumibili dyan. Kasi pwede hong mabili yan ng 40. In fact, yung mga kwento na may hinahalo, may diversion, yan po dahil imported po yung kinikilingan ng NFA ngayon. Kung yan po, binili ho natin sa mga lokal na magsasaka at nakahanap tayo ng solusyon dyan, hindi ho ganun yung magiging tanong po ata ni Senator Win. Kasi ang point, hindi na ho natin alam kung saan po napupunta yung klase ng bigas po na imported. Kasi hindi naman ho na-check rin kung sino po yung bumibili. I think that was the point, no?
Your Honor, the private importers, when they bring in rice from Thailand or other ASEAN countries, Your Honor, is that they are bringing in a higher kind of variety than that NFA buys, like 5% and 15%. The NFA buys only the 25%.
Ang tanong ko kung yung klaseng yan ay nasa merkado, magkano? Sabi nga po ni Yusek, it will be sold at a higher price, no?
Yes, Your Honor, for the private sector, they sell it at a higher price, of course, because they have a different variety. We refer to the percentage of brokens. The private sector bring in a lesser volume
Of
number
brokens.
of brokens, which is 5% or 15%. The NFA buys 25%, or we call it the ordinary rice.
Alright, siguro for the hearing na lang ho on rice, we can talk about the issues of NFA.
Yes, sir.
Kasi marami ho sa amin dito, pabor ho kami sa pagbaba ng presyo sa merkado, definitely. Pero itong pagkiling ho natin sa imported na bigas, at the end of the day, it's hurting our farmers. Kung habang meron naman paraan upang matulungan po natin sila. And for the past many hearings, magkakasama ho tayo dyan. I think nakaka 8 months na ho tayong hearings dito. In the end, nag-import pa rin ng NFA kaysa naghanap ng solusyon upang matulungan yung local farmers po natin. At yun yung hanggang ngayon, hindi ko pa rin maintindihan. Habang meron naman pong na-propose ng mga solusyon kung paano natin matutulungan. I mean, the money we're spending for outside, ang napapayaman po natin, magsasaka ng Vietnam tsaka Thailand. We all agreed naman here, baka pwede na namang itaas yung buying price natin na maghanap tayo ng ibang solusyon po doon, di ba? Na
Yes.
maybe NFA 17, tapos may contribution ka from another fund na, pandagdag para lang masatisfy yung local farmers natin. So, I understand it's good na may NFA rice po sa merkado, but that's not the ideal. That's not the ideal. Ang ideal pa rin po natin sana, matulungan rin ho natin yung local farmers po natin. No? Anyway, maybe for another hearing na lang po yan.
Your Honor, may I just make a statement? For now, the Council of the NFA has instructed a committee represented by all the members of the Council. Today and last week, we have conducted a meeting on the study on there is the possibility of increasing the support price of palay as instructed by the Council. Members of the Council are here, and that from the Economic Managers Group. And we are studying the cost of production and how we could help increase the support price for the farmers, sir.
Simpleng solution ho dyan. Yung isang problema ho ng farmers natin, yung inputs po nila.
Yes.
No? Nagtatanggal tayo ng taripa sa imported meat and fish. Bakit hindi tayo magpababa ng presyo ng fertilizer? Kasi pag ikot ko ho, yung sinasabi ng magsasaka, Senator, yung 800 pesos po noon, 1,100, 1,200 na po yung fertilizer namin. Tama no, Yusek, no, nagtaas po yan. At yun yung isa sa mga pinakamalaking pagtaas. I don't know if it's the train law, I don't know if it's transport cost, if it's tariff or kung ano man. Pero bakit hindi yun yung tirahin natin? Di ba? Ang tinitira natin yung imported na karne at isda, ay matatamaan na naman yung local farmers natin dyan. Ba't di natin tulungan yung meaning, kung meron tayong ibababang presyo, bakit hindi yung makakatulong sa local farmers? And I'm gonna get to this later, no, once we go into the discussion on solutions for lowering food prices, no? But ako lang ho, sana mapag-isipan din ho natin itong mga to, no?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I have a few questions to pursue the point raised by Senator Aquino for my own education. Attorney Dansal of the NFA, is it against the law for a private importer to bring in 25% broken?
No, sir.
No, okay. Do people, the private importers, actually bring in 25%?
No, sir.
No.
So far in the grant of their import permits, the variety is declared, so we have not
Yes,
monitored.
kaya alam niyo dapat yan. So there's no.
No,
So
sir.
they are avoiding that market also, that segment. Kasi inaano ko kasi dahil ko kumpara ko just to, because we were comparing 25% with 5% and 15% broken. I want to compare 25 with 25. So wala. The private importers are avoiding that segment. So, okay, pag-aralan natin bakit. So, I have a question naman sa ano. Thank you, Attorney Dansan.
Thank
On
you,
the Deputy Governor of the BSP. I hope you don't mind. Back to college muna tayo. Okay, this inflation, no, there are items. Who determines what items to include in the computation for inflation, and then the weight to give to the items?
The PSA, the Philippine Statistical Authority, Mr. Chairman, is the one that determines this on the basis of the survey on the consumption patterns of ordinary households. Meron ho tayong family income and expenditure survey. Also, every 6 years, nagkakaroon ho tayo ng rebasing para sa ganon ay ma-reflect din yung changes in terms of consumption patterns as well as tastes and preferences of the consumers. There is an interagency committee on price statistics. We have representatives from PSA, from NEDA, from DOF, and also from the BSP.
And we know that the official inflation rate, which is announced by the PSA, no? PSA then, has certain effects. Tama. So, why are we including sin products in the basket of items to calculate inflation?
Because ordinary households do consume, buy and consume those products, Mr. Chairman.
But we call them sin products because the government wants the people wants to discourage the people from consuming those products.
That's one. And two,
Papatungan na
also
natin ang katakot-takot na
tax
taxes
them.
yung mga yan. That's right. So, kanina sinabi mo, inflation expectation may actually drive actual inflation because it's a self-fulfilling mechanism. So,
Tama po yan.
so I find it strange that we include in our basket of items where we compute inflation some items which we plan to heavily tax. Therefore, driving up inflation itself.
The criteria for choosing items in the consumer basket, whether goods or services, are not based on whether the Department of Finance or the government intends to tax those products and services, Mr. Chairman, but it's based on the consumption pattern of ordinary individuals or families.
I get your point. So, but So you study the consumption pattern and all the items you see there, you have to include in the basket. Ganun po ba?
Hindi naman ho.
Oh, yun na nga. So,
No, ang point ho doon, ganito. Kung ano ho yung kinukonsumo ng ordinaryong tao, ordinaryong pamilya, yun po yung sinasama natin. Ngayon, sa ibang bansa, kahit ho yung mga sin products, nandun din po eh.
Alam ko. So, in effect, hindi nag-work yung ating pag-discourage for them to consume. Kasi by including them in the basket of goods, where you compute inflation, we're recognizing na nandun pa pala sila, binibili pa rin sila.
Well, again,
In spite of
that is not the basis for inclusion or exclusion of both goods and services in the consumer basket.
No,
It is another issue, Mr. Chairman, whether we want to encourage or discourage. That could be a case for law enforcement. That can be a case for the Department of Health, whether you want to encourage or discourage the consumption of sin products.
No, will tobacco and alcoholic products, the sin products, be forever included in the basket of items where the Philippines will compute its inflation rate?
If the Filipino people become enlightened, Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, and
Okay.
stop consuming
That's it.
those sin products, then they will disappear
Okay.
from the consumer basket.
That's correct. So for as long as you include them, therefore the effort of the government to discourage their consumption appears to be not working.
I'm not sure if that is
Because it's a recognition
if that is a
that the people
reasonable argument, Mr. Chairman, that including them in the consumer basket will actually encourage their consumption and in the process increase inflation.
But including
in the
them
process.
is a recognition that the ordinary Filipino household continues to buy them. Yun yung
Tama po
point.
yan.
Okay, so yun nga. So pwede na rin, it's a feedback mechanism that although the government considers them sin products, we will tax them heavily so that they should no longer be consumed. But PSA includes them in the items because when you survey the pattern of expenditure of the households, they are still being bought. That's
Correct.
Okay, so I get your point. So ang point ko lang is the additional taxes, if we heavily tax them, will now also lead to a spike, depends on the weight, no, on the a spike in inflation rate.
Correct.
So, balik tayo rin sa inflation expectation theory mo ba? Inflation expectation can actually influence inflation. Ito naman, the government policy of heavily taxing sin products may also help inflation.
No, kasi
rise in
pag tinax
inflation.
natin ang isang produkto, halimbawa sin products, mamamahal. Pag namahal po yan, madi-discourage naman yung consumers. Therefore, the demand goes down. If demand goes down, other things being equal, babaho yung presyo.
Hindi nga, kasi tataasan nga namin yung kunyari per pack.
Kung wala na hong bumibili, di bababa ngayon yung presyo nun? These are all market-based.
Oo nga, but as of the moment, they're still there. Yan ang point ko. So, yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
So, yeah, I'm just, tignan natin, for as long as the items are in the basket of goods by the PSA, it's a confirmation that ordinary households continue to patronize those sin products, which government is trying to discourage by heavily taxing it. Okay?
Mr. Chairman, if I may ask you, Sec. Castella, I don't know kung may industry figures kayo, but hindi ho ba si soft drinks may lower demand, and si sigarilyo for the past, maybe ever since the first sin tax law was passed, demand has actually tapered off? Meron ho kayong analysis po dyan? Kasi we've heard these stories, we've read it in the papers, I don't know if they're official numbers.
Mr. Chair, DTI does not monitor these products. However, we are in close coordination with manufacturers of soft drinks, particularly Coke, and they said that since the effectivity of train, demand has even increased. So they had to request the importation of sugar for their production.
You know, I had a briefing with them. They said honestly, so maybe we can check those figures, no? But for example, you hear of, because they've laid off workers, correct? So how can their demand increase and they're laying off workers? Are they suddenly more efficient? Parang that's not the case, no?
In the provinces, Mr. Chair, the demand for soft drinks has increased because the poorer families consume soft drinks to replace sugar, to use up sugar, Mr. Chair. That was the explanation given to us by Coke.
Sugar for sugar.
They
Parehong maasukal
consume
yun.
Coke, Mr. Chair, because we understand that sugar, the use of sugar is higher in the poorer families, particularly on sugar-sweetened beverages, because this is the source of energy that
So-
the cheapest source of energy that they can get in a day. So instead of drinking fruit juices, they drink soft drinks, Mr. Chair.
So why did they close down 2 factories if their
I-
demand is increasing?
I will ask Coke, Mr.
All right.
Chair.
We'll check because in a briefing that they also provided to our office, parang it was the opposite, which is that demand has gone down, no? I read in the papers that Zesto also wants to close down. I don't know if you heard about that. 1 factory. Obviously, if demand is increasing, they're not going to close down. So, ang point ko lang, Mr. Chairman, may epekto po ang pagtaas ng presyo sa demand. And the sweet spot for the economic managers is you increase taxes enough, but demand does not go down, so your collections are maintained. Because if you wanted to really kill the industry, you would raise taxes such that nobody could buy it anymore, but there will also be no collections. No? So yung targets mo per industry will also be hampered. No? So it may not come out in the inflation data, but on the per industry data, we can check if the demand is still there.
Just a final point lang dito sa theory, no? How can lesser demand for an item in the basket lead to a lower inflation rate?
All other things being equal, Mr. Chairman, yes. Kasi makikita nung producer, kokonti na yung bumibili nung kanyang produkto. The only way to maintain a certain level of return is really to bring down prices so that he can encourage
So,
more consumption.
It's not demand, it's the reaction of the price to the lesser demand.
That's demand, Mr. Chairman.
No, which pwede ring ibang reason no, basta you just look at the price of the item.
Well, that's still
not-
demand or elasticity of demand.
Maybe demand, maybe something else. Maybe generosity lang na undercut niya yung market. Pwede niyang gawin. Pero the point is you just look at the price, not really the demand. You're assuming that the demand led to the lessening of the price. Okay, but the final anong tawag mo doon? The final information that you use is the price of the product. Tama. For inflation lang po, for inflation.
Correct,
Not for tax collection, for inflation. Okay.
Yeah.
I get it. Thank you.
Before we move on, no, I have my final questions to NFA. Ano po yung mga action steps, no? Because I've read that NFA will bring in additional 500,000 metric tons of rice in the next few months. Ano po yung official action steps ng NFA to help curb the increase in prices of rice? No?
We are considering the increase of stocks that we should be holding, Your Honors, because at the rate we are distributing now, if the stocks that we have now is good only for 38 days, and then we still need more stocks to be stored in our warehouses, because other than our distribution mandate, we still have to keep a portion of that imported rice, or including the local palay that we have for our food security or for calamities.
But for this purpose, no, of fighting inflation or at least stabilizing the rice prices, what are the measures that NFA will be employing in the next 90 days, no?
We continue to distribute the stocks that we have, Your Honor, at that price of 27 and 32.
And how many, what is the inventory right now?
Our present inventory right now, Your Honor, is about 2,228,000 or 22 bags.
And that's enough to put pressure on the pricing?
Not enough, Your Honor.
Kailan po ang kailangan to put pressure on the pricing?
Maybe if we have an additional volume of additional volume of the same volume that we have
2
already
million.
purchased. Not 2 million, Your Honor.
Mga ilan?
It would depend on how the economic managers who are members of our council will approve.
So what is the discussion in your council?
The
Because
discussion,
the point here is really to put pressure on the prices of rice, no? So what, siguro naman na pag-usapan niyo ho yan, no?
for 30 days, Your Honor, I think would be
So
good
what is the
enough.
volume of
The
that?
volume is for 30 days is 1 million.
So 1 million in addition.
Yes,
Correct?
Your Honor, if we still have to keep for the buffer stocks for our calamities. Because the mandate of the NFA is to be distributed for the purpose of stabilizing the price in the commercial market. And then we still have to keep our stocks for our calamities.
So what you're
as
saying, in
buffer
addition to
stock.
what you have right now, NFA should import an additional of 1 million metric tons.
Not necessarily, we should, not necessarily importation, Your Honor, but harvest is coming by the month
Correct.
of
Or
September.
purchase 1 million metric tons of
Yes,
rice.
Your Honor, and by September, there's the harvest would start.
So has
and
that
we
been
are-
approved, Attorney, 1 million?
No, Your Honor. We are considering the increase of buffer stock. We are reviewing now, and we hope that we will be able to complete our recommendation so that if our council will consider, we will be able to have an increased palay support for this
So
coming harvest.
in short, to date, wala pa hong decision ng NFA on how to stabilize prices.
For now, Your Honor, hindi pa.
Considering that rice
Because
is
we have to
20%
consider
of...
both the increase of imported rice and the increase of palay support price so that we can increase our buffer stock
But what
procurement.
we want to know is, meron na bang strategy ang NFA to
are-
stabilize prices of rice?
Yes, Your Honor, and we will present in the next council meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney. Yes,
Thank you, sir.
Deputy
I
Governor.
think we should also remember, Mr. Chairman, that aside from the NFA direct imports of rice, we also have the minimum access volume. I think the 2017 minimum access volume has not fully arrived, and the 2018 MAB is yet to be activated. So in other words, aside from NFA rice, there could also be additional supply of rice coming from the importation by the private sector themselves. Yes.
And when will that be activated, yung MAV?
Sir, arrivals is already coming in because there are two stages of arrivals that is approved by the council. One is should be arriving by August 31, but because of the problem on the vessels and maybe stocks of supply from the source countries of origin, the council has extended the arrivals up to September 15 for the first phase, and then the second phase should be on December to February of next year. The council approved this period because it should not coincide with harvest season, the arrivals of the MAB.
Well, Attorney, just to move on, among the several mandates of NFA, two of the most important is really price stability
Yes, Your Honor.
and also access to the poor,
yes,
of
Your
which
Honor.
dalawa ho hindi nangyari.
Siguro, sir.
I mean, that's what the data is showing. Di ko naman ho inimbento ho to. Galing sa Philippine Statistics Authority ho to. No, I didn't pluck this out of my imagination. No, this is from the Philippine Statistics Authority po. No.
Your
So
Honor,
in any case ho, we just want to be enlightened. No.
yes, sir.
What is NFA doing to achieve those two mandates, no? And because kumbaga nasa red alert na ho tayo no? Wala na ho tayong time to dilly-dally. And rice being a very important component of the poor, no, as demonstrated by Dr. Mapa, we are putting a lot of emphasis on the access and the price of rice. Yun po ang gusto, that's the long and short of it, no, ma'am.
Your Honor, to stabilize a price, you should have to have volume that you can unload in cases of prices are high. For this now, we can admit that we cannot stabilize, but at least we have something already to deliver to the to the lower bracket of buyers that could afford NFA rice. If we have an increased volume, we have done that in the past, and we have enough volume to unload, then we can stabilize.
Thank you, Attorney.
Thank you,
We
Your
we
Honor.
move to the another mitigating measure, the unconditional cash transfer from the SWD. May we get updates? Saan na ho tayo, no, from the time we discussed this unconditional cash transfers?
As of yesterday, Mr. Chair, the total number of beneficiaries that we have already uploaded with the grants is actually 6.6 million beneficiaries, totaling 15.9 billion pesos. 15.9 billion.
To date, it's 6.6
To date po is 6.6.
million families.
Yes.
And the target is 10.
Target po is 10.
August na ho ngayon, no? Magfo-fourth quarter na ho tayo. So what is the new target? No? Based on the last hearing, you stated that the target was hopefully September we will complete the 10 million families. No? But does that still stand?
As of the moment, sir, based on our calculation, that still stand. Of course, in the last few months, because of inclement weather, we had to slow down in terms of the payouts for the social pensioners. These are actually the sickly and bedridden beneficiaries, senior citizens, and that's the reason why we had to slow down a bit. However, as a mitigating measure, we shifted our focus to the listahan and beneficiaries. So to date, we have already in our dashboards about 1 million of the listahan and beneficiaries ready to receive their grants within August. So about 1.06 million beneficiaries have already scheduled payout for August for listahanan. So we believe that September is still a manageable target as of today.
And I just want to remind the SWD, next year meron tayong ulit ganito, no? 300 pesos naman yun. No? And looking at the experience of 2018, it took you almost more than 7-8 months to complete the 10 million. Hopefully this will not be repeated in 2019. No?
As I mentioned in the last hearing po, Mr. Chair, we are actually giving away parang cash grants to the beneficiaries. So payouts will be a lot easier next year.
I think cash grants po. What's the...
I mean cash cards.
Cash cards.
Cash cards. This is like an ATM card given to the beneficiaries. So instead of doing physical payouts, it's gonna be deposited in their bank account, and it can be withdrawn at any ATM bank at their convenience.
Thank you, sir. And we also invited DOTR to enlighten us with the Pantawid Pasada, which is another mitigating measure. Yusek, anong update na po sa Pantawid Pasada? I was present during, kami ni Senator Bam were present during the hearing by Senator Grace, no, to talk about the Pantawid Pasada. And during that hearing, marami pong lumabas na issues, no? And again, this is a mitigating measure. Sana ho ay na-implement tong January, but to date, where are we right now?
Well, good morning, Mr. Chair. Ang tinatarget po nating beneficiaries for the Pantawid Pasada is a total of 179,000 registered franchise holders per LTFRB records. Yung nagsimula na ho tayo mag-distribute noong July, ang initial pilot distribution natin, 10,000 cards. Available na po yan, na-print na ng Land Bank. But yung na-release pa lang na cards is 738. Ang nagamit na nung actually ng mga drivers ay 288 pa lang. Pero ngayon po, kinokompleto na ng Land Bank yung lahat ng fuel cards. They are targeting end of August printed na lahat yung cards, and LTFRB is targeting by the end of September, we have covered already the 179,000 franchise holders. For 2018 po, ang ibibigay natin is 5,000 pesos na subsidy, but by next year, it will be bigger, which is 20,514.82 na po yung amount ng subsidy.
Ang target po is 179,000.
852.
Okay, and to date, ilan po ang na-issue na cash cards?
Ang available na po na cards is 10,000 cards. Yun ang initially printed na ng Land Bank. They're already completing the nung pag-print ng mga cards. They will be able to finish it by end of August. And then regional distribution will start also end of August. We're targeting by September, we have completed already the distribution.
By end of September also?
September daw po.
To the entire 179?
79.
Okay. I remember during the last hearing po, nagkaroon rin ng issue on if it will be given to the operators or the drivers. Has this been resolved? No, because I remember during that hearing, the drivers were complaining, no, of this method. So, ano po ang naging resolution dyan?
Good morning, Your Honor. Based on the provisions of the train law, it was specified, sir, that the benefit should be given to PUJ franchise holders. So, given that provision of the train law, we have to follow and give it to our franchise holders on record, sir, which is the operators.
Normally po, the franchise holders are the operators, correct? And how do you now monitor, no, kung itong mga drivers nakukuha nila yung subsidy, no? If the drivers and the franchise holders are two separate personalities.
Sir, there are instances po kasi na yung operator is also the driver. But in those instances that the operators have separate drivers, the card po kasi can only be used to purchase fuel. So, pwede naman hong ilipat ibigay po ni operator sa kanyang driver for the duration of their daily operations because the card can only be used sa participating gasoline stations po. So, on a normal day, if they're going to use the fuel subsidy, it's during yung refueling po sa operations kasi direkta po sa gasoline stations yung pag-debit po ng card.
Okay. So parang lumalabas ho dito in subsidy is 1,000 pesos per month. Is that correct?
For 2018 po, lumalabas mga 833 pesos
Per month.
per month.
Is this enough ho as a subsidy for
If you will,
the
based on
PUJ?
your computation po, kung kukumputin nyo per day, parang lumalabas piso per litro eh. Kasi ang average consumption nila is 32 liters. If you compute the subsidy, parang 32 pesos per day. So parang, yan po yung lumalabas na didiskwento
ang diskwento nila is piso per day?
po doon sa subsidy.
A piso per liter.
The average number of consumption is 32 liters.
32 liters per day. Ang consumption nila per day is 32. Correct? And ang discount ang subsidy na nakukuha nila
As po parang 32 pesos
32 pesos
per day.
Okay, per day. Enough.
Pero sa 2019 po, mas malaki na yung subsidy.
Itong 32 pesos per day, is this enough na ho for the PUJs based on your computation? Okay na ba ho yan?
Yun po yung lumalabas sa computation namin and restricted din po kami dun sa budget na binigay ng DBM which is 977 million. So dinivide lang namin yun for 179,000 targeted beneficiaries. So lumalabas po 5,000 pesos per beneficiary for 2018, covering basically 6 months from July to December.
Is there a scenario wherein makakatanggap siya ng unconditional cash transfer at makakatanggap rin siya ng subsidy? Is that a possibility?
Sir, we need to cross-match their names with the people in our database.
So yung database ng DOTR and DSWD it's not linked together.
Not at the moment, sir.
Okay, all right. Sige po. All right, thank
Right. Salamat, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to go over yung mga current solutions being discussed right now to fight off inflation. And for one, I'm quite happy that finally ina-address na to. Aminado tayo na kailangan nating i-address to. I think initially, we didn't expect the inflation to go this high, and now it's here. So meron na pong mga solutions na binibigay, no? And I'd like to go over some of them. If I'm not mistaken, maybe si DG can help us, no? Ang mga napag-uusapan, si Euro 2, Euro 4, napag-uusapan yung less tariff on meat and fish. Rice tariffication is another one. Are there other solutions being suggested to fight off the high prices? Or those three are more or less it right now?
Sa DTI, yung inyong SRP?
Yes.
Yes.
We also have recent instructions from Secretary Lopez to request the manufacturers to stop moving their prices for now, at least for the next 3 months.
Pero pakiusap po yan, no?
Pakiusap po because under the Price Act, sir, hindi naman, DTI does not have the power to penalize them.
Yes, only during times of calamity.
Yes, Mr.
Correct,
Chair.
no? So, kunyari po sa Marikina, Rizal, there should be a price freeze, no? Correct?
Moment, sir, as of July, during the calamity before this one, effective po up to 1 year. And there is price freeze that is effective from the declaration in July for the next 60 days.
For which areas po yan?
That's Marikina, and then San Mateo was recently declared in a state of calamity. So price freeze po.
So for those particular areas, yung nagtataas po ng presyo, pwede pong ma-penalize sa Price Act. But for everyone else, and it's really more persuasive in nature. Okay.
Difficulty of DTI, sir.
Alright. So, ano ho yan? Pakiusap. So, we're not really sure kung ano yung magiging response ng mga manufacturers natin, no? So, let me just go to the three. Yung rice tariffication na pag-usapan na ho natin. And let me ask si Yusek Serrano from DA, just to formalize matters, no? Yung posisyon po ng DA sa rice tariffication is to allow the rice tariffication because this is our commitment sa WTO, pero magkaroon pa rin ng regulatory measures to control the supply in the market for the imported rice. That's the position po.
That's correct, sir. So that we are not unduly flooded with cheap rice.
Okay, pero hindi ho ba yung intention ho nung mga nagsasuggest po nito is in fact to, in not so many words, flood the market dahil gusto nga pong mapababa yung presyo. So baka ho, hindi iba yung intentions, no, ng mga grupo or could you care to comment on that?
Po. But what we're saying, ganito po, Mr. Senator, you will note that in 2008, we had a spike in the prices of rice. This is a very thin market. Our demand there at that time, we increased demand in the world market by about 1.8 million.
Yes.
We would expect something higher than that if there is unbridled and uncontrolled
Importation.
importation.
All right.
And our farmers are not yet that competitive or prepared. So, could you imagine if there is, say, some simulation, say, about 3 million metric tons will enter? So, that, Mr. Chairman, will induce a spike in the world market.
Alright. Eh, yung balak na ho ng NFA, 2 million. Sabi nyo kanina, 2 million, di ba? 1 million, sorry. How many million did you say earlier, Attorney Dansal? 1 million, okay. Yung 1 million ho, ano pong epekto niyan?
Definitely ho, magkakaroon din ng ano yan, impact, especially kung ina-announce natin. Kasi po dati very careful tayo sa announcement ng ating kailangan na i-import kasi nga po merong
May speculation.
It's a very speculative market. If it is speculative in the domestic market, mas malakas po ang speculative element sa international market.
Alright.
So we have to be very careful kasi mag-announce ka ng 500 tapos
They'll jack up their price.
jack up their price.
Alright.
Eh paano pa po kaya kung halimbawa 2 million, 3 million? And this will now become a regular feature of the international market. So we might actually end up with buying more expensive rice than before. So maybe in the first round we will be buying cheaper, we'll have cheaper domestic rice. But if the base landed cost from more expensive international rice because of the spike in demand that we had caused, because of our yung policy na ganon, eh baka we might end up with buying more expensive rice, just as expensive domestic rice, and not only that, farmers have abandoned the rice industry, and that we are now very much dependent
On the international
market, which we cannot control.
Oho.
So yun po ang concerns namin na kailangan meron kayo tayong facing at saka hinay-hinay.
Alright, we share your concern. Ang takot ko kasi ito, no, and this is the same for the 3 solutions being discussed now. Nabigla ho tayo dito sa inflation. DOF did not predict it, BSP did not predict it, we did not want it to go this high, pero nangyari na yan. Now we're scrambling for solutions. Yung unang solution, yung rice tarification, baka ho biglain in our effort to lower inflation, biglain ito, yung farmers ho natin yung matatamaan, baka makaapekto pa tayo sa world market price. That's what you're saying, Yusek, no?
Yes, sir.
Alright. Ito naman hong pagbaba ng taripa sa meat tsaka fish, and later I'll ask Yusek his opinion on this also. Ito hindi ko maintindihan, no? On August 7, nasa DBCC po tayo, I asked the question kay Secretary Pernia, no? I think si Assistant Director Ganapin is here, no? Tinanong ko po yan kay Secretary Pernia. This is August 7, 1:59 p.m. And some of you are here. So tinanong ko po siya, ito pong nababasa natin, ano pong tingin ninyo? Ang sagot, well, we're thinking about it. It's a fluid idea. That's what Secretary Pernia had said. And sabi ko, so I take it, it's not a suggestion. It's a suggestion from Congress, not the economic managers. Sabi ho niya, that's correct. In any case, pag-uusapan pa. By August 8, this is just the next day, ang sabi ho, ito naman si Secretary Dominguez, we appreciate the suggestion of Speaker Arroyo, but as I said, we are already considering it, and pag-uusapan pa. By 5 p.m. of August 8, President Duterte to sign EO on tariff reduction on imported basic goods. So parang it went from kailangan pa itong pag-usapan, kailangan pang i-discuss sa sektor, to mukhang pag-uusapan na, to in a span of less than 30 hours, pipirmahan na daw itong EO na to. And my understanding was that there was a tarification, a tariff commission hearing where the farmers were brought together at sinabihan sila, nag-hearing tayo kasi by August 15, which is today, correct, no? Which is today? Yesterday. O by August 15 or this week, hinihintay po kasing mag-suspend kami, no? Pipirmahan na tong EO na ito, na binababa po yung taripa sa imported na karne at saka isda. So ano ba talaga? Ang takot ko is that this will be a rushed decision. Maybe, again, in the short term, sabi ho ni Yusek, in the short term, baka maganda po epekto niyan sa merkado, but in the long run, again, it will be our local farmers who will be put at risk. So, ano ho ba talaga? Ino-own na ho ba ito ng economic managers natin? Is this now part of the economic managers' plan to stave off inflation in the Philippines?
Tama po kayo, sir, na it was being discussed.
And I think, sir, yung CTRM meeting nung August 14, I think, yata, or kahapon, already discussed yung plan to reduce tariff on the said products. And with regards to the EO, wala pa kaming hindi kami privy, at least sa department namin, sir. But again, sir, baka magkaroon, sir, ng effect yung meeting kahapon nung CTRM. I don't know kung ano po yung naging decision ng result nung meeting sa
Okay,
CTRM.
I asked one of my staff to attend the hearing kasi minomonitor po natin itong mga nangyayari po sa inflation. At ang binanggit po sa akin is practically, sinabihan na yung mga natipon na mangyayari na ito. And ang pinagtatakhan ko lang po is that on August 7, it was fluid. Pag-uusapan, magkukonsulta, by August 8, meron ng EO na pipirmahan. So in 30 hours, napag-aralan ho ba natin talaga to? Tsaka yung epekto nito sa ating mga local farmers? Ang takot ko kasi, yung farmers na naman yung kawawa dito. No? Neda, are you behind this? I mean, are you 100% behind this move to lower our tariff on imported meat and fish? On the record,
Sorry,
please.
sir. As far as I know, personally, sir, wala pa kaming official position on that, sir.
Okay, but your secretary said, Duterte set to sign EO unless fake news to. Ano ba to? Manila Bulletin. Okay.
Assistant Director, can you discuss yung discussion ng CTRM? Now, we invited them, no, but walang representative. So, and that's actually that's why we invited DA also to discuss itong nababasa, pareho kami center BAM, nababasa lang namin sa dyaryo ito. So ano ba talaga is this part of the drastic mitigating measures to fight off inflation?
Sir, unfortunately, sir, wala kami, yung department namin was not in the meeting, so we were not privy sa meeting. I think ibang department ng NEDA yung nag-attend nag-represent for NEDA. So as of now, sir, wala pa kaming alam. But we will check on that, sir, yung
Sige.
sir.
DOF or BSP, anything to share on okay, si Yusek na lang. Ano pong masasabi natin dito po sa pagbaba ng taripa sa imported na meat and fish?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Your Honor. I was in the meeting yesterday of CTRM. There was a quorum, decision has been made. But, Mr. Chairman, there are confidentiality measures and I don't have clearance. But let me just say that the position of the department, I think, has been generally upheld by the analytics that have been presented and reported by the Tariff Commission. The Tariff Commission, by the way, Mr. Chairman, is an attached agency of NEDA. And they were the ones that were tasked, I think, by the economic managers to conduct the tariff hearings.
All right. So does the Tariff Commission need to propose to the President or it does not emanate from the Tariff Commission? It's merely the President who decides.
The Tariff Commission, Your Honor, only responds to the instructions of CTRM or NEDA.
Okay.
And then it reports to the technical and cabinet levels of the TRM. And then the TRM endorses this to the NEDA board. The NEDA board passes judgment on it on whether it is something they can
All right. So babalik po sa
the President.
So babalik po sa NEDA.
NEDA
Yes.
board, sir.
NEDA board, no?
NEDA board.
All right. Assistant Director Ganapin, hindi niyo po alam kung ano po yung naging desisyon. Hindi niyo po alam. Anyone in NEDA? Kasi this is very germane to our topic today, obviously. Anyone who can share kung ano po yung kayo alam niyo ho yung posisyon ng Tariff Commission nyo? Alam niyo ho. Pero ayaw lang po sabihin.
Your Honor, I can tell you the position of the department.
Sige po.
And what I don't have clearance as a alternate member of the cabinet TRM, Your Honor, is that we have confidentiality measures, where there are very extreme penalties for.
Okay lang po. Whatever you can share po.
You can of course summon CTRM chair, Secretary Lopez, or any member of the CTRM.
Well, can you share lang po the DA position?
Ganito po. in the first place, nag-express kami ng reservation doon sa tariff hearing. It was called on short notice, but there's nothing illegal there. They can call it short notice. And so what we just did was that we informed our stakeholders in agriculture that there's going to be this tariff hearing and you'd better be there. And you'd better be prepared with the numbers because it appears just from, it was not apparent in the notice for tariff hearing what would be the proposals. Normally, if there is a tariff hearing, you would see specific proposals like tariff for pork from, say, 35 to 0, things like that. But it was just, say, tariff modification of the following tariff lines. So we prepared for any eventuality, and the stakeholders, accompanied by our staff, participated and expressed reservations for any movements in the tariffs.
Right. So ang position ho ninyo, wag nang galawin itong mga taripa.
Dahil po, unang-una, ang sinasabi namin, yung many of our primary producers, meaning farmers, are price takers.
Are?
Price takers.
Price takers.
They do not dictate the price.
Opo.
And we've seen that if you track the recent behavior of farm gate prices, they've been relatively stable, or they are true to type in terms of the, the seasonal fluctuations. What we see though, Your Honors, as observed in the press and the economic managers, ang spikes po ay nandoon sa trading sector, wholesale, retail. Doon po tumataas. So, ang sinasabi namin, bakit mo ipe-penalize by allowing more entries ng imported, cheaper and heavily subsidized, i-displace na naman yung local mo, wala naman ho sa amin ang problema. Ang problema dapat siguro, tignan natin yung trading sector, yung mga margins na na-generate doon, kasi doon po nag-originate yung spikes. The other things we also said was that yung pong, wala naman pong problema yung imports, papasok naman po eh. Pangalawa, meron Secretary Piñol also just to test whether meron bang impact talaga yung tariff modifications. On his own, he lifted the special safeguard duty on chicken. Of course, under the law, he has the sole authority to lift and impose. Okay? So sabi niya, okay, para makakontribute kami, kung tignan natin talaga yung sinasabi ninyo, ay magkakaroon ng impact yung tariff decrease sa presyo ng commodity. Tignan natin sa chicken, tatanggalin ko yung, ililift ko yung SSG. And on the very same day of the tariff hearing, he communicated to the Department of Finance and the Bureau of Customs requesting them to lift the SSG. So that's one. So ngayon po wala pa kaming feedback doon. Pangalawa po,
So yung goal ho niyan para bumaba yung presyo ng manok.
opo.
Okay, so gusto natin makita kung bababa nga.
Opo.
Okay.
Although we have been heavily criticized by our poultry sector because they said it's not gonna happen.
Well, tingnan natin.
So it's because they say we've seen it again and again. It's ultimately the traders who would just, reap the differential.
Yeah. Well, so in short, we agree, Yusek, na hindi pwedeng biglain itong pagbaba ng mga taripa. Kailangan pang pag-aralan.
Sa pag-aaral po namin sa sitwasyon ngayon, hindi po hindi tariff modification ng solution.
So in short, you're going even a step further. Sinasabi nyo, this is not a good solution.
That's precisely our point. Now, there are solutions, Your Honors, within the authority, the purview of certain agencies. Like, tinignan namin yung utilization ng MAB ng karne, ng iba-ibang MAB products. Ang nangyayari doon, hindi nila ginagamit.
Okay.
So, nire-reserve nila doon sa bare months. So, what Secretary Piñol has done was, I think this Friday is going to convene a meeting. But again, persuasive lang yon.
Of course.
Like you can say, well, kung hindi nyo gamitin yan, baka,
there are different ways to persuade. There are different ways to persuade.
Opo.
Okay.
The other one, Your Honors, many, particularly Representative Joey Salceda, mentioned fish. In fact, he told me in a separate meeting na yung fish kailangan talaga tanggalin nyo yung taripa. Sabi ko, mababa na yung taripa eh. Ang sinasabi po natin, round scad or galunggong. Yan po yung significant na import natin. Pero tayo po, nag-a-allow tayo ng imports under the Fisheries Code as amended. Nag-a-allow lang po tayo ng imports, hindi po sa wet markets.
Supermarket.
Supermarket processing po.
Yes.
So what we did at the DA was we convinced Secretary Piñol to sign in accordance with law and after convening the stakeholders in fisheries to sign a certificate of necessity which will allow under certain terms and for certain volumes and under certain conditions to ensure safety to allow importation of round scad or only round scad or galunggong, not exotic species, into the wet market. So that has been done yesterday. He signed it in the morning, allowing for Navotas Fishport to be able to receive this.
Ano ho yung epekto po niyan sa mga local fishermen ho natin?
Kasi po, pwede pong i-recommend yung certificate of necessity kung meron pong nakikitang projected na shortage. So, in-estimate po yung initial shortage is about 17,000 metric tons ng galunggong. But of course, this will have to comply with sanitary and phytosanitary requirements,
Okay,
etc.
Yusek, ako, di hamak, siyempre ho, ikaw yung expert po dito, no? But, hindi ho ba yung issue of substitution po dyan? Pag may mas murang galunggong sa merkado, people will flock to the cheaper fish. Yung local fishermen naman ho natin, tumataas po yung presyo nila, hindi naman nila kasalanan yan. Because as you said, and I agree, the producers aren't the one causing the spike in the prices, no? Yung local fishermen ho natin, unang-una, mas kukonti na po yung nahuhuli nila. So, pareho naman yung oras nila na nangingisda. So, they have to raise the prices to make up for their needs, no? So, nandiyan na ho yan. Yung traders, so, sila rin yung, the spike in the value is with the traders. Pangalawa. Now, kung yung pangatlo, ma-flood nyo po yung, although I think it's just Navotas at this point, but you flood the market with cheaper fish, hindi ho ba yung ating local fishermen yung may ipit rin dyan? Or is the market enough na hindi po maapektuhan yung kanilang sales?
It would be inaccurate to say na hindi maapektuhan itong ating ordinary fishermen, but we think that there is enough space. In the first place, bawal po kasing talaga sa wet markets yung mga imported fish.
Kaya nga, ngayon na pinapasok nyo po siya dyan, diretso po yung tama ho niyan sa ating local fishermen. Hindi, tama ho ba logic ko?
Tama po yun. But yung analytics naman po, there is, when we say enough space, yung pong determination ng initial volume of 17,000 metric tons is the amount of deficit that is projected within the next 3 months.
For the whole Philippines po yan or just for NCR?
Just NCR.
Alright, so we're not talking about other areas, no? We're just talking about NCR here.
Opo, we're still looking at certain crucial urban areas where fish prices
It's very
are
expensive.
high. Yes.
Alright, o sige. Second, just on the Euro 2, Euro 4, anyone here, can LTFRB, sorry, DOTR, Yusek Garik, pwede ka
Send them with the kind
yes.
indulgence before we leave yung agri, no? Curious lang po ako, kailan po tinanggal yung taripa sa manok?
Your Honor, hindi po tinanggal.
Ano bang
Tinanggal lang po. Magbabayad pa rin po ng taripa yon.
binabaan?
Meron po
What
kasing
happened?
special safeguard. Ganito po kasi yan. Yung pong pumapasok na chicken sa atin, US or anywhere, masyado humura. And pwede tayo mag-impose ng special safeguard. Ang trigger po is something like 90 plus. Pag pumasok po yung manok ng say 85, kung ano yung difference yun ng SSG. Together with yung landed niya with the 35% tariff. So, tinanggal po namin yung sinuspend or nilift yung SSG imposition po.
And when was that? Kailan nangyari yan?
If DOF and Bureau of Customs were able to act August 15, it would have been effective August 15.
Bago lang po.
Bago lang po.
Okay. No, I was I thought medyo matagal na because I have the pricing for the last 12 months. So,
Hindi po.
so that's irrelevant. I just want to ask ASEC Lambino. There's a proposal, no? However, I understand that the proposal to reduce tariffs, no, for certain basic commodities is still confidential. No, that's what I understand. But will this help stabilize pricing of basic commodities such as fish, meat, and yung mga papayagang makapasok na mas mababang tariffs?
Mr. Senator and Honorable Chairman, we actually followed the lead of NEDA on this issue. I hope you don't mind my saying that because we really do. But I did hear Secretary Pernia say that it has to be studied very carefully because the tariff rates on these products are relatively low. And so lowering them further might help a little bit, but maybe not as much as people expect.
That's what my point is, no? Ano ba yung effect nito sa pricing, no? Will this really bring down prices of basic commodities and stabilize inflation or stabilize the rise in prices?
I think yung tulad ng sinabi sir ni Yusek sa DA, it depends on how much yung volume ng pinoproduce. Like for instance sir, if you're reducing tariff of a particular good, and that particular good for instance pinoproduce naman domestically about 90%, then kahit i-reduce mo yung tariff, I think personally walang maging effect sa price. Unless na lang sir, yung yes sir.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, the way I see it, kasi parang NFA rice yan tsaka commercial rice, di ba? Si NFA naman, kukunti lang naman yan sa merkado, it's less than 10%. But the presence of an NFA rice puts the commercial rice in check. And hindi sila masyado nakapagtataas. Because our assumption there, and the reason why we want that, is because we assume that si commercial rice is really inflated yung presyo. In the case of the domestic meat and fish, ibababa mo yung imported na karne tsaka isda, directly, going back to direct and indirect, directly, bababa yung presyo niya, maliit na merkado lang yung pwedeng bumili nun. Pero, maapektuhan yan yung 90% na kailangan maghabol ng presyo, especially kung papapasukin mo siya sa palengke. But, my understanding is that the price of meat and fish is not like commercial rice na aminin lang natin talagang yung traders na mamanage sila yung pataas na presyo. In the case of the fishermen and our farmers, sagad-sagad na sila dyan. Sagad-sagad na yung karne, sagad-sagad na yung mangingisda natin. So, anong ibababa nila? Ang ibababa nila, yung pwede nilang kitain pang araw-araw. And in fact, yung mga ibang market vendors na nakausap namin, per kilo, 5 hanggang 10 piso nilang kinikita nila. Bawat kilo ng baboy. So, pagkalit-lit na ng kinikita nila, pag may pinapasok ka pang imported dyan, magbabagsak pa sila, wala na silang mabagsak. Yun yung palagay ko na baka unintended consequence natin to kung hindi talaga to na pag-aralan. And I think si Yusek will agree with me na that's a potential risk by lowering the price of imported products. Now, ang takot ko, and babalik ako dito, baka knee-jerk reaction na naman to eh. No? On August 7, pag-aaralan, sabi ni Asik Tony, pag-aaralan, by tomorrow, we go on recess. Baka by tomorrow, meron ka ng EO. So, di ba, ang hinahanap lang naman namin dito is any move on the economy will have grave effects on everybody, no? And in this case of the imported meat and fish, even initially, baka maging maganda yan sa merkado. In the long run, it will be our local farmers and fishermen who again belong to the poorest sector. Dr. Mapa, kasama sila dun sa 30% natin, yun na naman yung matatamaan. And our safety nets are not there for them yet. Hindi pa talaga buo yung safety net natin sa kanila. So, again, we might be going into a decision which is rushed. And I hope that the President will listen to the Tariff Commission, to DA, to NEDA. Parang it seems all of you here don't really want. Meron ba dito talagang pabor dun sa pagbaba ng taripa? I mean, NEDA, DSWD, anybody here who's really in favor? Yes, sir, Yusek?
Just to inform you also that in the case of fish, ang tariffs po natin dyan napakababa na. Yung round scud is 5% MFN. But most of our imports of round scud would be coming from Vietnam, China, and Taiwan. In the case of China and Vietnam, ASEAN and ASEAN-China, zero na po yan. So parang sa amin moot na yung ano, ang kailangan lang po talaga siguro sa markets, kaya medyo mataas ang presyo kasi medyo kulang ang supply. So kailangan lang i-supplement ng hindi naman yung bahain mo, but just meron kang available na pang balance doon sa
May I ask you, Sec, kung gusto talaga natin ibaba yung presyo ng karne at saka ng isda sa ating local farmers and fishermen, ano yung pwede natin gawin para mapababa yun?
yung po kanilang important inputs to
Feeds,
production.
di ba?
Yes.
Hindi ba feeds ho yun? Yung feeds ho, anong porsyento po yan ng gastos ng isang livestock raiser? Kunyari sa baboy o sa manok, di ba ho yan ang pinakamalaking porsyento ho ng gastos po nila, di ba?
Mga 40 to 60% po.
Okay, and that's largely imported, correct?
Opo, yung mga ingredients like soybean meal, soybean oil meal. Pero malaking ano po dyan ay corn. But sa corn po, medyo sufficient na naman tayo.
May taripa po ba tayo sa mga imported products na yon? Is that, I don't know, no? I also don't know the answer. May taripa po ba yun or tariff-free na po yun?
Mataas pong taripa natin sa isang sensitibong product dahil pinoproduce natin at marami tayong farmers sa corn.
Sa corn.
Sa corn ay 40%.
Ang tariff po natin.
Opo, pero sa ASEAN po, ang corn ay 5% na lang din.
Okay. Sige, yes, Chairman.
Deputy Governor.
We agree, Mr. Chairman, that we really need to look into the issue of reducing tariff, particularly on two products, meat and the fish. Meat accounts for 6.25% of the total consumer basket, and fish by 5.74%. Year on year, July 2018 versus July of 2017, meat prices went up by 5.8% and 11.4% for fish. So year to date, Mr. Chairman, given the average of 4.5%, meat prices went up by 5.6 from January to July 2018 versus January-July 2017. And in the case of fish, the inflation rate is 11.8. Mataas yung dalawang produktong yun. In the case of fish, Mr. Chairman, as Yusek Serrano has already indicated, yung level ng tariff is already very low. But why is it that fish prices continue to go up? There are three reasons, Mr. Chairman. One is lower production and supply. I think this is beyond tariff. Why? Because the decline could be traced to one, weather disturbances, climate change and variability. Second, degradation of coastal habitats. As estimates show that 30 to 50% of the country's seagrass beds and 60% of mangrove have been lost to unregulated economic activity, so law enforcement yan. And finally, overfishing or overexploitation of fishing grounds. The second reason why fish prices continue to go up significantly is because of fuel prices. Okay? Fuel, langis, which accounts for more than half of operating expenses for fishermen, which rose sharply in the first half of 2018. And finally, and we were discussing this earlier, cost of feeds. Cost of feeds rose by 1 to 2 pesos per kilo, which also contributed to the price increase of fish, particularly milkfish and tilapia, since feeds account for 68 to 72% of total production. So malaki yung contribution ng feeds. Tapos fuel prices, which also accounts for a big share of the total cost of production. But and I think these are the things that actually account for the inflation
Okay,
rate.
Deputy, I agree completely. Bakit hindi natin pwedeng gawin yung feeds? Gawin nating mas mura yung feeds. Sa ganun, yung 90% ng local farmers, matutulungan natin. Hindi ko alam kung may mga naiisip na programang ganyan. Yung fuel, na pag-uusapan natin, again, this is an indirect increase, no, because of the fuel. So, baka nga po yung taripa na sa imported ho tayo kumikiling, baka talaga hindi yan yung best way, no? At ngayon ho, sa inyong lahat, parang wala namang nagbabandera po niyan dito. Parang wala naman ho, no? So, I'm just worried that we will be doing another knee-jerk reaction And I hope you can still talk to your principals to discuss this with the President. Baka may knee-jerk reaction tayo, may unintended consequence tayo sa agricultural sector na ayaw naman ho nating mangyari rin. No?
Deputy Governor, I think what this whole exercise is meaning to address it's supposed to address a short-term volatility, no, by bringing in goods. In theory, it will stabilize prices. But in your opinion, with this impending lowering down of tariff, will this help in the short term, meaning 90 days? Will we see positive effects?
I think there could be some incremental impact, but to what extent or how significant it's going to be, that's an empirical question, Mr. Chairman.
With that, Assistant Director, meron ba tayong simulation, research? This is actually a very, I agree with Senator Bam, no? It's a move that will have impact to the countryside, impact to the different agricultural sector. Again, recognizing that we have a problem right now and we need to address it in the short term, meron ba tayong simulation na pinatakbo and para makita rin ho namin whether this is a correct short-term solution?
Sir, Your Honor, as of now, we don't have the simulation yet, and but we will try to do that to crunch the numbers and utilize
Immediately, because
Yes,
this is
sir.
already a hot topic, no?
Yes, sir.
And from our information, the Tariff Commission has already met, the President and other people have already talked about this a lot. We need to run the figures. We cannot implement this and run the figures after. No, we run the figures now and then let's see whether we implement it or not. No, but from what I'm hearing right now, if we will implement it, tapos tingnan na lang natin kung ano ang mangyari. No, which is not the correct process. Yeah. And I would like to urge NEDA to already start the process, and we will require you to present to us one of these in a few weeks from now. No?
do that, sir.
Assistant Director, anong grupo ho kayo?
National Policy and Planning, sir.
Okay. Well, I think malinaw naman ho yung mga pag-uusapan dito. Sana you could invite the individuals in NEDA who are involved in these topics. All right. Mr. Chairman, can I just ask about the Euro 2, Euro 4, no? Masasagot ho ba yan ni Yusek Gary, itong Euro 2, Euro 4 question?
Well, yung sa Euro 2, Euro 4, insofar as the OTR is concerned, we will still stick in the implementation, strict implementation do sa PUB modernization ng Euro 4 minimum. Yun po yung stand ng DOTR as of now.
Okay. Anong ahensya po yung nagtutulak ng Euro 2? DOE?
Ay, parang DOE yata ho, I
As,
read it in the papers lang, but
Okay,
I
so
have no
wala pa kayong
information.
multisectoral meeting, wala pa
Wala
kayong...
pa hong nangyayari as far as I know.
Okay, so is it premature to say that this Euro 2 idea is going to push through? Or mukhang ano na rin to? Mukhang advanced stage na rin po ito?
Wala ho, insofar as DOTR is concerned, stick pa rin ho kami doon sa requirement namin na Euro 4.
Yeah, yes, but my question is, kasi involved ho kayo dyan, the modernization is directly involved. The cars on the road,
Yes.
because if I'm not mistaken, si Euro, tama ba? A Euro 4 cannot handle a Euro 2 gasoline, is that correct? Yung nababasa ko lang kasi yun sa mga dyaryo, no? Can anyone, yes sir, Mr. Reyes, or Yusek, sino man ho?
Your Honors, just to, because you know that this will have an impact on the coconut industry, what I'm going to tell you. Yung Euro 2 po, na especially yung diesel, lagyan mo lang ng CME yan, pwede na yan sa mga old engines ng ating transport sector. At the same time, let me inform you that the price of coconut oil in Rotterdam has dropped from $1,850 to $900, which also reverberated because it's an international traded commodity. Ang copra po dito sa atin, bumagsak from 30 pesos per kilo hanggang sa meron pong areas na marami, especially sa Pacific side natin, na mas mababa na sa break-even point nila na 18 pesos. Ang suggestion lang namin doon i-move tayo from B2 to B5 para po ma-lift yung heavy na hindi ma-lift yung prices ng copra natin. And besides, the industry that produces CME is under capacity ang kanilang So you create a new market for copra that will also have an immediate impact on the price of copra. So our coconut farmers, of which there are 3.5 million, their income is being obliterated every day.
So you're saying, itong pagpasok ng Euro 2 could be good for the coconut industry?
It will be good for the coconut industry, and with the use of CME or biodiesel, improving the specs for biodiesel from B2 to B5, it's going to be heaven sent for the old engines of the transport industry.
Does that correct the issues with the law, with the Clean Air Act? Kapag ang Euro 2 nilagyan mo ng, tama ba, CME? Pag nilagyan mo ng CME, corrected na siya or hindi pa rin? Not necessarily.
But pwede po nilang pag-aralan yung so yung mag-Euro 4 ho tayo, ibig sabihin niya magpe-phase out tayo ng mga
Well, yun na nga yung nangyayari, no? Yun yung PUJ modernization. Mr. Reyes, sige ho. Kasi unfortunately walang DOE dito, no? Yung proponent po nito, but if you can shed light lang on the matter.
Honorable Senator Aquino and excuse me, and Committee Chair Win Gatchalian, on the issue of Euro 2, there is a memorandum order. I don't know if it has been signed by Secretary Cusi, but the Philippine Institute of Petroleum preempts this by already discussing among ourselves the impact of the Euro 2. So there is a letter position paper that is due for signature by the group, by the Philippine Institute of Petroleum through our chairman, and this is going to be submitted, and that's the reason why I cannot yet discuss before the committee the results, because
well, now is the time. Sige, kahit sa inyong personal opinion na lang po, kung ayaw niyo magsalita tungkol sa grupo po ninyo, para lang may mapag-usapan tayo na mas substantial. What is your, I take it you're in the petroleum sector ho, no? So
Yes,
you're in PIP. Ano ho yung posisyon po dito?
Ang po sir, ganito the Department of Energy, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources issued before 2016 the improvement of the fuel quality both for diesel and gasoline on improving from Euro 2 to Euro 4. Euro 4 means, since Euro 4 encompasses a lot of other parameters, a lot of specifications, but in the Philippines, the Euro 4 is quite a little unique in the sense that it is only the sulfur that we improve, practically reducing the sulfur content of fuel, at least I'm speaking for diesel, from a very high 500 ppm on sulfur, which is harmful to the environment, to a very drastically to only 50 ppm. So that's a very drastic improvement as far as environmental protection.
Saan ho is Euro 2? Where is Euro 2 dyan sa...
Euro 2 po, in terms of diesel, it's 500 ppm in sulfur before. Now, when Euro 4 was not necessarily mandated, it was an order of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources saying that there must be, or starting 2016, there must be, or fuels must be, vehicles must be Euro 4 compliant. Euro 4 compliant. And therefore, registration of vehicles starting in 2016 should be only Euro 4 compliant vehicles. Which means that Euro 4 vehicles will still fly. On the Euro 2 against Euro 4, for clarification, a Euro 2 compliant vehicle can take definitely a Euro 2 fuel. And if it takes a Euro 4, it's better for it, no? Mas maganda sa kanya. But on the other hand, if you have a Euro 4 compliant vehicle, it can only take Euro 4 compliant fuel.
Okay, so magpapasok tayo ng Euro 2 and para sa mga lumang sasakyan. Is that correct, Yusek Gary? I mean, sorry ikaw lang yung DOTR dito. So, ganun ho ba yun? Kung magpapasok tayo ng Euro 2, hindi ito para sa mga... Hindi siya pwede sa mga PUV, kasi ginagawa nyo na siyang Euro 4. Hindi ito para sa mga sasakyang nabili in the last 3 or last 2 years. Okay, so meaning if I bought a vehicle in 2014, pwede naman yon. Yes, it's only been the last 2 years. Okay. So, anong posisyon po ng DOTR dito? Anong percentage po ba? I guess, what, 90% of cars can accept this? Only a small percentage cannot accept Euro
Yung
2?
sa DOTR po ho, yung nire-require lang naman namin ng Euro 4 compliant is yung mga PUVs para sa modernization. Yung sa mga private cars, hindi naman po siya kasama doon.
So, wala hong problema mga private vehicles dito sa Euro 2 or Euro 4 gasoline or
Hindi
diesel?
po siya cover nung ano.
So, the question really is, to save 30 centavos of the pump price, should we be willing to bring in dirtier gasoline and diesel? That's really the question, no? Now, my hope is that, kasi sabi nga ni Yusek Gary, hindi pa nila napag-uusapan talaga, DOE, and it's unfair that they're not here, should convene DOH, DENR, and maybe even DA, kasi si DA seems to be for it, no? Kahit pa paano, di ba, sir?
Yes, maganda po siguro ang pag-aralan. Although, let me clarify, Your Honors, PCA is not under DA.
Okay,
But we still consider the coconut sector
Of
as
course.
agriculture, and under the canopy of the coconut is a lot of agriculture. Thank you po.
Pwede ba yung exemption for the coconut industry? But then again, gagamit ka pa rin ng makina, it will still pollute the environment, no?
I'm not an expert, but maybe, Your Honors, we could invite experts from the biodiesel sector, especially from the manufacturers.
Kayo ho yun, di ba? Mr. Reyes, kayo po yan? Hindi kayo yun?
The Philippine Institute of Petroleum has membership of oil companies. The biodiesel and bioethanol, which are both blending components of diesel and gasoline respectively, we're just recipients.
Okay. Sir, hindi mo ba, is it correct to say kapag hinaluan mo yan ng mga biodiesel, bababa yung mga masasamang emission o hindi rin yan?
That's of course the claim of the biodiesel producers and the bioethanol producers. It's a law, and therefore oil companies are complying with the law in terms of 2% biodiesel and 10% ethanol.
Yes, but if it's kung Euro 2 nga ho yung hinaluan natin ng biodiesel, for example, will it correct, for example, the emissions or hindi pa rin?
Somewhat.
Ganito kasi yan eh. Yung Euro 4, hinahaluan natin ngayon, di ba, ng B2. Para in theory, luminis. No? And Euro 4 is supposedly a cleaner fuel. No? So, malinis, haluan mo ng konti, mas lilinis. Ngayon, nagpasok ka ng madumi. Madumi, haluan mo ng konting malinis, madumi pa rin. Di ba?
Kung haluan mo ng napakaraming malinis, hindi pa rin?
Well, depende sa sasakyan kung kaya ng sasakyan.
Okay.
That is the, I mean, to make it simple.
May limit po, Senator Aquino, kung magkano pwede nyo ihalo.
So, last question, DG Gunigundo. Is this worth it? Kasi again, this is being proposed as a way to stop inflation, lower pump price. At the end of the day, it's just 30 centavos. Although, sabi ko nga, yung 2 piso malaking bagay, so we cannot discount 30 centavos na rin. Ano ho ba ito? Is this a worth it solution? Ano hong tingin ng economic managers?
For the economic managers, Mr. Chairman, but I guess anything that can mitigate the current situation will be useful to the ordinary people on the streets. But to what extent, this is something that I think we need to study more.
To the kind indulgence, Senator Bam, this representation also chairs the Biofuels Oversight Committee. No? So, through the Energy Committee. So, we're convening the Biofuels Oversight Committee precisely to talk about 2 matters. No? Ethanol, no, which is bought locally, but the price difference between the imported ethanol and the local ethanol is almost double. No? Ibig sabihin, mas mura po yun sa labas kaysa yun sa loob. At the same time, we're also going to talk about yung biodiesel, no? And how biodiesel can improve the pricing of the local diesel. Kasi mas mura na po ang biodiesel ngayon eh. No? So we will talk about that on a separate session. No, I will invite both DA and the other fuel related stakeholders. Before we continue, we also invited EER, which is another stakeholder in the economics field, and want to hear your comments.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we move on to we also have our position on how much trade has contributed to inflation. I would just like to emphasize once again that on the issue of, we commend the committee for having discussed so many substantive solutions to addressing the rising inflation. But we'd like to go back to the proposal of suspending the excise taxes, and we'd like to caution against this particular proposal because we want to bring in the perspective that what is also important for us to recognize is the redistributory function of taxes. And we'd like to go back to what ASEC Tony earlier emphasized, that 70% of fuel consumption is actually by 20% of our population. So we'd like to be able to collect those taxes and redistribute them to the poorer population in the form of subsidies and social services. So from a broader perspective, the long-term solution to address the plight of the poor, of course, is to uplift them out of poverty, Mr. Chair. And this cannot be realized by simply maintaining the low prices of our commodities alone. We need to be able to invest in our people, invest in infrastructure and social services, which would need financing by the collection of taxes. So hopefully we don't undermine these long-term goals of our country in our pursuit to address the short-term and transitory impact of inflation and perhaps the train. But of course, we cannot be insensitive to the plight of the poor and who are affected by the rising prices. And that's why we continue to emphasize the importance of expediting and properly implementing the social mitigating measures under train. We mentioned before in the deliberations that we should include the 6th and 7th deciles to provide them with unconditional cash transfers as well, because they will also be impacted because they are the ones who will not benefit that much from the lowering of the personal income tax, and they're also not going to be receiving transfers. Unfortunately, it did not reach the final version of the bill, so we continue to emphasize the need to be able to address the impact on the 6th and 7th deciles of the FIES. We also support the move for rice tariffication, but we would like to emphasize as well the need to ensure how exactly the RCEP or the Rice Competitiveness Enhancement Program will be implemented or conducted, because we also share the concern of the senators about how to insulate our local farmers from the impact of this. And we share Senator Bam's concern as well on lowering the tariffs for meat and fish. We cannot push for knee-jerk reactions or reactionary measures to address the short-term concerns that may have long-term consequences on our local agricultural sector. And lastly, we also support the move by the TTI to continue monitoring the indirect impact of train, especially how to address the abusive business practices of unwarranted price increases by actually providing more regulatory mechanisms for businesses and firms to comply with, so that they won't jack up their prices that much. Further, we also have our own computations on how much train has impacted inflation, which my colleague would be discussing shortly.
Honorable Mr. Chair, we'd like to share our estimate of train's impact on inflation based on data from the PSA as well. We computed an estimate similar to BSP's methodology, and we found that in April, it contributed 0.55 percentage points when it was around 4.6% inflation. So we expect that in July, that would be somewhere closer to 0.65 percentage points. So it's much closer to the BSP's estimates than the original 0.4 that was estimated by the Department of Finance. However, we would like to caution, though, that the suspension of train does not necessarily imply that inflation would fall by this amount as well. First, the excise tax just accounts for around 20% of the increase in fuel prices. So suspending train would not necessarily curb the entire impact of the rising fuel prices. And given that fuel consumption is heavily concentrated among the richest Filipinos, we find that by taxing their consumption more, we can actually redirect the revenues that we gain from this tax to help the poor who will be affected. So by suspending train, we can actually forego the possibility of collecting these revenues and redirecting funds to assist the poor. So if we agree with the sentiments of Senator Aquino that if we are to target the consumption of the poor, we need to target the inputs that are related to their consumption. And particularly, if we look at the inflation figures, 0.69 percentage points was due to fish and seafood. So we feel that fish is something that we can target, and we agree with Senator Aquino that we can target their feeds or their other inputs like fuel as well directly. Finally, we would like to clarify that a suspension, we would like to clarify the details of the suspension. Would suspending the fuel excise tax also necessarily mean that we will be forgoing the incremental revenue? Because we are concerned that the incremental revenue that is part of the law that will go to the mitigating measures would be compromised. So we would caution against suspending the excise tax right away, as that would possibly forgo our ability to distribute the cash transfers to the poorest households. Finally, we'd just like to give a final comment on the presentation of Dr. Mapa with the goal of eradicating poverty in mind. In the long run, we feel that the goal of eradicating poverty and solving inequality is addressed not by keeping prices down, but rather by mobilizing our resources towards social spending and creating opportunities for the poor. So this should not prejudice our efforts to curb short-term inflation. Rather, we should emphasize the long-term structural reforms, which include strengthening our agricultural and resource management and administration. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Yusek Castello, in times like this, no, a lot of people take advantage of the volatility, and that's really the nature of commerce, no. And what measures is DTI employing in times like this? No, what activities? What are the extraordinary measures that you are employing so that businessmen will not take advantage of this volatility?
Mr. Chair, since the effectivity of train in January 2018, we have expanded our suggested retail price, which, as you know, is a mere suggestion and information of the consumers. However, we have observed that manufacturers, either because it is a social contribution on their part, or because they know that they're very much aware that DTI is present in the market, they comply with the suggested retail price. Most of them, most of BNPCs have not moved actually since 2018. Basic necessities and prime commodities of DTI include manufactured food products such as canned fish and canned meat, and noodles and coffee and the likes. Only 87 items out of the 241 shelf-keeping units of DTI have increased lately, Mr. Chair. There is a second wave of increase for some products, but not all. There are only around 8 brands that have increased their prices. And basically, Mr. Chair, they all say that it's the fuel that causes the rise in their prices. We have instructions from the Secretary to request manufacturers to not increase their prices for the next 3 months, Mr. Chair. And we're getting acquiescence from them.
Effective is the suggested retail price
It's
mechanism?
It's at least a guide for the consumers, knowing that that an item should be priced only at this much. They get the real value for their money, because DTI vets also the data that we get from manufacturers. We make our own computations based on research and the market price gathered in on the ground, as well as data received from the manufacturers. So we vet them, Mr. Chair, and if we see that the request is higher than the computation of DTI, we talk to the manufacturers to bring it down, and they do for the most part, Mr. Chair. And this would at least inform the consumers that they have choices. Like, we expanded the suggested retail price items to give consumers more choices, Mr. Chair, of at least the brands and the variants of these products.
A lot of these items are not in the supermarket, no? I mean, a lot of them are wet markets. Do you also cover the products in the food basket?
Mr. Chair, only as assistance to the Department of Agriculture, the DTI is now looking at agricultural products. As a matter of fact, we had several meetings with the United Broilers, the producers of poultry products, and we concur with the statement of Yusek Serrano that it's really the traders that increase the prices, Mr. Chair. For example, a kilo of carrots has farm gate price of 7 pesos. When it's sold in the market, it's 80 pesos. So somewhere in between should be the traders is the cause of the rising cost of these products. And like poultry is 105 pesos per kilo farm gate price, sold in the market at 160, 170.
So who monitors, who computes and monitors this price arbitrage?
It's supposed to be the Department of Agriculture, Mr. Chair. They also release their own suggested retail price of several agricultural products. We have been waiting for them to request the DTI to help them in the enforcement and monitoring, but we have not received any formal request so far from Secretary Piñol. Without that request, in the absence of that request, Mr. Chair, we have been doing our part as well for agricultural products.
Ano po yung activity ho natin? Any activity to any price monitoring activity? Does the
Meron po
agency?
kaming marketing assistance service that performs this. We don't have too many people, Your Honors, and we don't have police powers, unlike DTI. So I take note of the suggestion from our colleague from DTI so that the Secretary of Agriculture can formalize this. But it's very important also that the LGUs are involved, Your Honors, in monitoring the prices.
Again, no, I just want to emphasize in situations like this, marami talagang magsasamantala, no, because the prices are very volatile. And but I'm just trying to understand if there is a special group or an agency that monitors, studies, and recommends to policymakers on what to do. No, because we might be suggesting a policy, or the executive might be suggesting a policy na hindi na pag-aralan dahil kulang sa information gathering and enforcement. No, meron ba tayong ganyan na mechanism in the DA?
In the department, sir, this is the normal functions would be through our regional offices and their marketing assistance groups. But as I've told you, Your Honors, hindi po ganun karami yung mga tao namin kasi hanggang region lang po kami. And we've also been diminished by the rationalization of the staffing of the department. So we would really need coordination with the agencies like DTI and of course the LGUs.
Mr. Chair, there is the National Price Coordinating Council chaired by the Department of Trade and Industry. We conduct regular meetings with in the presence of all these interagency and private sector members, and it is in one of these meetings that the suggested retail price for agricultural products was raised. We requested Secretary Piñol for a meeting, and they agreed. And it was also agreed in that meeting, Mr. Chair, that they were going to engage the Department of Trade and Industry to assist them in...
Have you implemented this SRP for agri-products?
It was published in June.
So it's already being implemented
Mr. Chair.
right
It's
now?
being implemented now, but we do not see any enforcement or monitoring activities from the Department of Agriculture, and that is why, Mr. Chair, we take it upon ourselves in DTI.
Bakit
to do
ayaw
that
nyo na
for
lang
them.
mag-usap para we have I mean, if DA is lacking in manpower and DTI is Seems like they're aggressive in monitoring and analyzing all of these price fluctuations.
Mr. Chair, it was already agreed with Secretary Piñol, and we have been following up with him. Kaya lang
What's
po
missing?
because it's a...
What's
it's
missing?
A,
MOA, what MOU, or anong missing? I mean, you guys have already met, you already talked, so anong kulang na lang to how to operationalize this concept?
we just need to probably coordinate with the Enforcement Bureau of the Department of Agriculture if they have.
We don't have an enforcement bureau, Mr. Chairman. That's the, as I've said, we don't have enforcement powers like DTI.
Mr. Chairman, ang kulang ho nila ngipin, actually. Because the SRP is all recommendatory. It's only mandatory during times of calamity. So, when I used to be chairman of trade, we used to do a lot of price checks. But even the price checks, it works best for your supermarket because it's really more of information. Sinasabi nyo sa mga tao, oh, yung mga lapis meron kang 2 piso, meron kang 6 na piso. So, for the consumer, kung gusto mo ng mura, doon ka sa 2 piso. If you go to a formal, what you call that, a modern format, which is your supermarket, your department store, you will see a range of products, pare-pareho pero magkakaiba ang presyo. In that case, an SRP nakapaskil doon is useful because alam ng mga tao, pwede kong hanapin yung mura. Pero sa palengke, Yusek Serrano, sa palengke, hindi naman nagkakalayo yung presyo ng mga baboy, ng mga isda, di ba? Hindi naman ho yung nagkakalayo eh. Na parang meron kang 20% lower, 40% higher, hindi naman ho, di ba?
Ay, hindi po. Mataas na yung 5%. Kasi
nagpa-parity ho yan eh.
Competitive, very competitive po yung environment.
Exactly. So kahit po magpa-scale tayo ng SRP sa palengke na o dapat yung baboy gantong presyo, dapat yung isda gantong presyo, I don't think it will make much of a difference. And wala rin naman tayong masasabi dun sa vendor. Kasi my understanding is that, you know, in those cases kasi, our persuasion is on the retailer. Diba? It's on the retailer. O bookstore, siguraduhin nyo yung mura, maglabas kayo. Pagdating ko sa palengke, yung market vendors natin, and this is my understanding, ipit na rin sila eh. Naiipit na rin sila dun sa presyo. They experience a downturn in their sales. Their supply cost has gone up. Naiipit na rin sila. I don't think meron ka pang masisqueeze dun sa ating market vendor. Maybe yung step before that, baka yun ho yung pwede nating tingnan. But an SRP effort is at the retail level. We should go to the, maybe previous to that, sa supply chain, sa wholesaler. Although, to be honest, hindi rin ako clear, and maybe mas alam ho to ng DTI at DA, kung saan yung bukol dun sa kita sa agricultural product. Because it's definitely not with the producer. I don't think it's with the retailer also. Kasi yung retailer tsaka producer, sila ho yung market vendor tsaka magsasaka. Sila nga ho yung mahihirap. Yung targetin ho natin, yung mas kumikita sa gitna.
Sa cartel.
Maybe. No? So meaning, hindi ka naman mag-SRP sa cartel. Ang cartel, hulihin natin. Di ba? Yun yung enforcement na hinahanap natin.
I agree with Senator Bam. We have done our research on garlic, onions, sugar, and rice. So that
The
is
times
where
that we should be very vigilant. No, these are the times that we should be really on the ball with monitoring, analyzing, and enforcement. No, in normal conditions, hindi naman mangyayari ito. But this is abnormal conditions. No, and that's why we need the support of DTI and DA to get together and really analyze and enforce. No,
Yung pet peeve ni Tita Cynthia, ni Senator Villar, is ever since we passed the, tama ba to, Senator Win, cartel as economic sabotage, or what is the term? Ano yung term doon? Agricultural smuggling. Pati yung cartelization, di ba? It's illegal already. Ever since we passed those laws, wala pa talaga nahuhuli. So, it's been 3-4 years already, Yusek, no? Wala pa tayong nahuhuli, kahit nakasuhan man lang. Parang wala, no? Wala rin, no? So, I mean, baka kasi we're looking at the wrong places, no? We're squeezing the wrong people.
Just urge DTI and DA to get together. Baka it's already, again, no, this is part of the mitigating measures, no, monitoring and enforcement. But if you don't get your act together, baka masyadong huli na tayo, and it's already August. No? So I hope na umpisahan nyo na ito. We already talked about this, but it's a matter of operationalizing what you guys agreed upon. No?
We'll do that, Mr. Chair. We've been following up with, especially with Undersecretary Kayanan of the Department of Agriculture, but he will have to.
Well, like I said, we will be having more hearings like this, no? Because inflation is really a pressing issue. But aside from that, the budget is already coming up, no? So this will be another issue that the senators will raise during the budget season. And I hope, no, bago naman pumasok yung budget season, you guys can already agree and operationalize. We need action, eh. Meeting tayo ng meeting, hearing tayo ng hearing, pero walang action, eh. With that po, to be honest about it, after hearing the different agencies present their different mitigating measures, a lot of it can be implemented within 90 days. However, para sa akin, it's a hodgepodge of different measures and different strategies. And would really like to have a unified approach to this issue. And I think the right agency to do that is DOF, no, to put all of this together, no, and DBM, no.
Mr. Chair, just to give you an update on this, all that we have talked about here in terms of the implementation of this program, we're putting this together into a GMC, Joint Memorandum Circular, that is supposed to be guiding all the implementing agencies on how to implement these mitigating measures. As a matter of fact, we have already done that one, and hopefully we can have that signing of the GMC to be signed by the chair of the Interagency Committee, the DBM, the DUF, and the DSWD within the month. So we are just right now having this legal review of this GMC for us to have it signed within the month.
Director, kasama lahat ng social mitigating measures, no?
What is in the
Law?
Section 82 specifically, the trade law.
Okay. Kasi may mga iba hindi pinapansin, like yung discount ng NFA, yung discount ng PUJ, kasama ho siya.
Here, Mr. Chair, all of the mitigating measures that's
And
identified
Director,
in the
let's
law.
also include the ones outside of train, no, because they also have some effect, no, in pushing pressure on the prices. For example, enforcement. If the lowering down of tariffs will be applied, then that was outside of train. Marami hong napag-usapan tayo na outside of train that should be part and parcel of the strategy. And let's be honest also, to be honest about it, marami ho dito napag-usapan nung February, no, si Deputy Governor was also there. Hanggang ngayon hindi pa na-implement. And let's be honest, to have to approach this in a very kumbaga, to know what's really happening, we have to be honest and assess where are we and how to correct ourselves in the future.
Director, yung initial computation ho ninyo, collections minus all of the mitigating measures, ano yung ending number natin for 2018? It's 140, right? The projection is 140?
For 2018, it is 89.9 for the total collections of the train, and 30% of that will be around 27 billion. And for the 2019, it's a 144.2.
Sorry, Director. Bakit 89? Di ba 140 dapat yan? Yung first year of implementation? Oh, it's only 90?
90
Okay.
is because the 1B has not been passed. Because the assumption before is to include the 1B of the
1B.
train 1.
Oh. Okay, sorry. So let's say it's 89. Because the law says we're using 30%.
Yes, Mr.
Correct? But the truth is, we'll be using more than that.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, there's nothing stopping us from exceeding 30%. Correct?
Yes.
Because we will have to exceed, no? So, So hindi siya minus 27. It's actually a laundry list of all of the
More
mitigating
than that.
measures.
As a matter of fact, yes, Mr. Chair, just to enumerate that, that was also already mentioned by ASEC Lumbino. We have already provided around 122 billion as a part of the mitigating measure, or social services that
Yeah.
we're giving.
Let's, kasi again,
Focus.
GAA, ano, so hiwalay natin. From the 90, you subtract all of the social mitigating measures in Section 82. Magkano ho yung matitira?
Okay, just around 2.8 billion, just to from the 27, giving out around for the UCT and excess
27.
already, yes.
27.
Already, 27, yes. Because we're already providing 29.8 billion, Mr. Chair.
Memorandum, kasama niya dyan assessment.
We have a portion of the JMC of the monitoring of how we're going to monitor the implementation of programs of
Okay.
this, Mr.
Sorry,
Chair.
Mr. Chairman, just to go back to the previous question. So 29 si UCT. Si Pantawid Pasada is 1.3, no? No. Oh, trillion. Si
1
Pantawid
billion,
Pasada.
sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yes,
sorry.
1.1 billion. Okay,
Yeah,
kayo
1
naman ho,
billion.
kinabahan ako, nag-trillion kayo. So 29 plus 1 plus
Included to be 3.1.
what's the 3.1 po?
For the PUB modernization.
That's next
but-
year.
So we have already provided this year also 1.1 for subsidy for the equity.
Kasama ba yung PUJ modernization sa train? Okay, o sige. So
But
It's a
it
pro-
was
it's a program, but
when it was being filed, it was considered to be, but during the in terms of the actual ready when we had the laws passed,
Wala.
po yung PUB,
Oh,
but
hindi
it was
dapat-
provided in the budget actually last year.
yes, but
when we
wag nating isama yun because that's not in the law eh. No? Meaning it was a funded item separately sa GAA.
There was also, Mr. Chair, provision of the law that we should provide other measures. So that's also part of the
But
measures.
basically, internally, you're charging it there. Basically, no? Sige, but, okay, sige. Anyway, how about the rest? Si NFA, si discount fare,
It's there. It's here also, Mr. Chair. Probably if we have this sign, we can provide you also. But in terms of funding requirements, Mr. Chair, actually we have already exhausted what has to be provided. This is equivalent to 30%. We go beyond already with the provision.
okay. So that's what you're saying. Kung lampas ng 30%, we don't have to fund it.
Not necessarily, Mr. That's why even for other mitigating measures, we have provided here already in the GMC.
Our point, Director, is outside of train, no? Because what you're talking about is inside the train law. But there are other measures outside of the train. But no one seems to be putting this together, no, as one holistic solution to mitigate inflation.
As I mentioned, Mr. Chair, we have provided that here. As a matter of fact, one is here. The UCT, the PP, the Pantawid Pasada, the fuel voucher plus the fare discount, the public utility modernization program, the subsidy for rice, the free skills training for minimum wage earners and the unemployed. So we have that, Mr. Chair.
How did you determine the prioritization of what gets funded, what doesn't get funded? Alphabetical order or kasi parang alphabetical yung ginawa niyo, no? Yung ABC, yung
Not really, Mr. Chair, because what was computed is, of course, 30%. So, and the priority then is to have that UCT first, of course, because
So, who determined the prioritization?
that
Kayo
was
na ho.
determined by the proponent, use a car or the
DOF.
Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
There's no malice to that question. It's a very simple question. So, DOF as the head of the interagency, tama? DBM,
But
okay.
we are-
DOF suggested ano yung uunahin na mapondohan. And then, okay, my suggestion, and again, this is purely a suggestion because this is already implementation, is you indicate how much everything will cost. So that, if the collections are high, nakaabang yung... Is that correct legislatively, Senator Wino? O hindi pwede yun? Kasi it will eventually be a line item, di ba? Eventually, they'll have to have a line item for that. So baka unprogrammed. Ano ho yan? Is that considered, it will have to be in the 2019 budget, no? All of these.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we have provided the all mitigating measures identified, for example, the UCT, the Pantawid
Okay.
Pasada.
My question is this, no? So kunyari, may projection kayo for 2019, which is
144, and the equivalent to that mitigating measure is for 30% is 44 billion.
okay, 44 billion.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Eh what if 200 ang collections ninyo? Meaning, are you going to put a line item to all of those mitigating measures, or will you just not include the line item in the budget kung tingin niyo hindi aabot doon yung pondo?
We have provided, Mr. Chair, a line item for that. For example, the UCT, the Pantawid Pasada. We
But
already
the ones
provided.
lower in the list, yung currently hindi nyo napopondohan.
So far, wala po siya doon sa list. But of course, we are talking with the implementing agencies how to implement this program, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
because the truth is, what we can do is, and again, I'm not saying we're gonna do this, pero what if iba yung appreciation ng senators and congressmen about the prioritization? For example, di ba? At gusto namin pondohan yung NFA, kunyari na lang. So, I suggest that pakiaral po and come back to us with actual line items because I will look for that in the budget because it's in the law. No? Now, whether it's funded completely, partially, or to what extent, yun yung kailangan siguro pag-usapan during the deliberation. But to not even include the line item, I think is not a good practice. Kasi basically, by not including it in the line item, you're circumventing the law. Kumbaga, na-technical natin yung batas na we were able to go around the law by not funding it. No? Which I think is not a good practice because the law is very clear kung ano yung mga mitigating measures niya. No?
We take note of that, Mr. Chair.
Here, raising your hands.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Senator, just to also share that the Office of the Cabinet Secretary has convened an interagency committee to look at train deliverables more broadly as you were describing it earlier. And that group has met a couple of times already. So we are looking at a broader group of mitigating measures. Just also for the information of the honorable senators, one thing that we would very much like to look more closely at is the fare discount that you mentioned earlier, because one of the things that we learned by analyzing what it might bring about is that it might be a disadvantage to the jeepney drivers, because based on we are thinking through how it would be implemented, it might negatively affect the income of our jeepney drivers, because it's very difficult to implement fare discount,
Yes.
except at the point of ridership,
Yes.
and that is the interaction between the rider and the driver.
Oh, but kasi my assumption was that through the proceeds of the train law, may subsidy kayo sa makukuha ng fare discount. Not that they would charge less, but that you would find a way to supplement them because it's a revenue measure eh. So, 'di ba? Kasi like for example, may mga batas dito, fare discount for students na wala namang revenue measure. The assumption there is that the airline charges less, 'di ba? In the same way pag may discount for senior citizens, it's the company that bears the brunt of that. But in this case, because it's a revenue measure, the assumption there is that it will go and fund it because Section 82 says from the proceeds. So meaning, in the end, the discomfort or the problem might be the flow of money kasi matagal yung, matagal yung pagkuha nung tulong na yon, but the money should come from train. It shouldn't come from, hindi dapat manggaling sa jeepney drivers yon.
And just to also share, the PSA is also here, honorable senators, and the national ID system has been signed into law, and that will also help in terms of targeting social programs as soon as it's rolled out robustly over the next few years.
As like I said, we'll have more of these hearings on inflation, and would like to hear that expanded group, or that group that talked about the expanded impact of train. We took it upon ourselves to put together a summary of all the different supposedly mitigating measures to adjust train inside of train law and outside of train law. And we tried to estimate the impact, but we would like to hear a much more holistic approach to this issue. No? And like I said, I think Professor Mapa demonstrated earlier, the poor is really the one bearing the brunt of this inflation. No? And we would like to see and report to our constituents that the government is actually doing something effective, not only for show. No, ang nangyayari kasi for show no, but something effective. No, and that's where DOF will come in as the body that will put all of this together, and NEDA to run the figures. No, because and kayo na bahala, no, as the economic cluster team. No, but we're looking at DOF. Ako personally, I'm looking at DOF primarily because they're the one who really represented, no, the whole economic cluster when it came to lobbying for the train bill. No, in the next hearing, we'd like to hear that output. Yusek.
Mr. Chair, two things. First, you might, Senator Bam earlier mentioned that we do not have the teeth in monitoring and enforcement, so perhaps the good senators can look into the possibility of amending the Price Act so that we can have more teeth. Second, sir, I would like to read the message of Secretary Lopez on his position and what was discussed in the Tariff Commission. In our consultation with stakeholders and Tariff Commission, it turns out that there is no need to adjust tariff rates. What will be needed are volume-enhancing moves, like from the Department of Agriculture through a department administrative order, removing special safeguard measures, like the prohibition of imported fish to be brought to the markets and only for processors. This can be suspended to allow more supply in the public market. Also, the utilization of MAB for chicken and pork to have more supply in the market. And then third, to run after hoarders and traders hoarding supplies of agricultural products. So it should improve.
So, will we have an EO or not in 2 days? That's the question, no? But si DA po, si Yusek gumagano'n. So, we hope that kasi sa totoo lang ho, itong lack of one voice or parang magkakaibang panig, it has a lot of effect on the market, on the farmers, on the traders, on the market vendors. Ang laki ho ng epekto niya na nagkakaroon ng uncertainty yung mga tao. I hope that I agree with your position, by the way. So I hope the DTI, DA, NEDA position will push through, no? And ang alam ko ho kasi, according to the news reports, that EO is supposed to come out as soon as we suspend, and we're suspending today. So we'll see what will happen. But I hope mapag-usapan po yan ng maayos rin. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. As a final word, suggestion lang naman to. Maybe just a suggestion on. I think the DOF can probably create a task force to address the inflation. I think the task force can be a multi-sectoral and a multi-departmental task force, so that you can coordinate as well as come up with a holistic approach on inflation. Hindi lang po yung nasa loob ng train, no? But again, outside of train, because the outside of train also has a lot of impact. And it's also good to show to the public that we're acting fast, no? And just a suggestion lang naman, no? And I think everyone agrees that it's really a volatile situation right now, no? And we need to address this quickly.
The recommendation is very well taken, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, thank you. And again, any parting words before we terminate the hearing?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to add that for NFA, we have strengthened our regulatory visitorial power to warehouses to assure the public that there are enough commercial rice, and to assure them that there are no hoarders. And we have, yesterday we have met with the Deputy Director Vicente de Guzman of the NBI. We have a memorandum of agreement together with the Bureau of Customs, Philippine National Police, and we are now starting to compose the team that will composite team that will go around the different warehouses of traders. In addition to that, Mr. Chair, we have invited our traders, pallet traders and importers for a meeting at the Department of Agriculture tomorrow to continue our dialogue with them regarding the supply of rice in the market. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Attorney. And earlier, Senator Bam requested for a computation of indirect effects of train. I think from BSP, well, just mag-coordinate na lang ho kayo kung ano. With that, again, this is an ongoing hearing as long as inflation is the mainstay of concerns here in our country. We'll be conducting this type of hearings, and hopefully sa sunod pong hearing meron na tayong mga positive at action na mas mabilis, no, at effective, no. It's really not only getting information from the different departments, but also pushing the different departments to fulfill its promises to the people. All right, so thank you very much. Meeting is suspended.